Man, welcome, Jesse.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Thank you so much for coming in. How you doing?
I'm pumped.
Pumped?
Just really excited to be here. So
Man,
appreciate it, man.
I appreciate it. I'm really excited to have you in here because, one, I know a little bit about your story, but I don't know much about it. So a lot of it I'm going to be getting for the first time here, which I'm really excited about, and kind of diving into the arc of your story. It sounds like a really interesting one. And I want to kick it off with congratulations for a massive achievement that you've just done, a massive ultra marathon only a week ago, right?
Yeah, finished up Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
Yeah, and started Saturday morning. So it was a 24-hour run around a track, 400 laps, 100 miles.
100 miles.
Yeah.
Holy shit. That's crazy. 100. So what's that? 160 kilometers?
Yeah, 160.9 to be exact.
Far out. How long did that take you?
Just under 24 hours. So I think I finished 23 hours, 55 minutes. So I had 5 minutes to do a victory lap, which ended up being a walk. I had quite a few people come down to support me.
Right on.
Towards the end, which was awesome.
Did you have people coming in running with you at different stages?
Yeah, throughout the whole race. And I never ran alone. So it wasn't like a typical event or marathon most people would run. I kind of went out on my own accord and made a Facebook event and said, hey, I'm going to be running during the winter solstice, the coldest and darkest night of the year. I'm going to be doing it to raise some money for the Black Dog Institute, which do important critical work for young Australians experiencing mental health issues and adults experiencing mental health issues. So it was a mental health event, and I wanted to do it to raise some awareness for people with mental illness and to challenge myself. So essentially I invited a whole bunch of people down. A few hundred people ended up coming down, a lot more than I expected.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah, so from people from old friends, family friends, grandparents, people I never met before. And throughout that time, I never ran alone. I had people jumping in the whole time, even 3, 4 in the morning. I think we had a group of about 5 crazy people out there running at -1 degree. So
was it -1?
yeah, it got to about -1 at 1 in the morning.
Holy shit, man. That's incredible. Good job.
Thank you.
Far out. It blows my mind. I cannot imagine trying to run that far. Have you ever run a distance like that before?
The longest I'd ran previously was last December, so about 6 months prior, around 106 kilometres. That was for an event. It's called the Mount Kosciuszko Ultra Race.
Whoa.
And yeah, so that was up and down mountains, a little bit different.
Yeah, like because Kosciuszko, like that's extreme ups and downs, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it was about 3,000 metres of elevation, that one. And it's different, like it's easier because you get to break up the muscle groups. Like when you go uphill, you're using different muscles to when you're going downhill or when you're running on the flat. When you're running on a track, you're using the same muscle groups. So you're just smashing out your gluteus medius, your T3 and ITB band. So pretty much all the muscles on the side of your legs, which kind of do short strides with, sort of like the muscles you use walking.
Yeah.
They just get smashed. So it's a different kind of challenging. Obviously on the trails, you're dealing with the harsh terrain of weather, the elevation, climbing increases your heart rate. So there's a few more variables. So it's a completely different kind of race, different kind of challenge.
And when you're in the mountains, I can imagine you're visually stimulated the whole time. Like it's just a crazy, incredible view where if you're on a track, it's not necessarily like that, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And to be honest, that's why I love trail running. Trail running is my passion, and we can talk more about that shortly. But the track, yeah, you don't have heaps to look at. Like I did it around a track in Greensboro, this 100-mile run. And it's actually quite a pretty area. I deliberately chose it because it was local and there were nice gum trees around and parks to look at. But if I was doing it by myself, it would have been really difficult and boring.
Yeah, by yourself.
Crazy.
That's some David Goggins shit right there.
Yeah. He's actually a big inspiration, you know.
Yeah.
And the thing about this run and why I'm so proud about it is because like 4 years ago, you know, I would have thought that was something completely impossible to do. You know, like I was not fit. I didn't play sports. I was addicted to drugs. I was smoking a pack of ciggies more a day One of my good friends said, "You have the worst lungs I've ever heard in my life." This was when I fell asleep at a bush stuff.
Yeah.
And 2 a.m, he came back to sleep, and it was quite sandy. But he just said, like, your body and lungs are just so unwell. So
Doesn't sound good.
Yeah, not good. So it's not like I was this gifted athlete who had always been into fitness. I mean, I played sports when I was 14, 15 years old. But between the age of 15 and 25, the only fitness I did was working in construction. Besides that, nothing else.
It's a massive thing to decide to do. From my perspective, anyway, I can imagine from probably everyone's perspective, running 160 kilometers is fucking hectic.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is.
I can't imagine it, man. I'll run 10Ks and I'm wrecked.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the thing. If you've actually run before, it probably puts it in perspective how difficult it is. If no one's ever run before, they don't really have anything to compare it to.
just how your body actually holds up. Like I've found that as soon as I get to a certain distance, different parts of my body just start breaking down. Like IT band stuff, like knees, hips start hurting. And in those moments, I have the thought of like, what do you have to be doing for your body to be able to make it that far? Like, do you have a crazy routine or mobility or fitness or stretching routine to keep your like legs and just body in check to be able to run that far?
Yeah, so it's been a process, about a 4-year process now. Pretty cool story. I like talking about this because I actually started running in rehab, like 2 weeks into rehab for alcohol and drugs. I quit smoking cigarettes, and every morning people would get up around this outside court area and smoke cigarettes at like 6 a.m. And we're having PT classes in this rehab, and often in the PT class we'd do laps of the courtyard, the same place where people smoked. So I thought, if I'm not going to be smoking at 6 a.m, I'll just do laps of the courtyard running. And after a few weeks, I was like, I kind of like this feeling of being in my body, moving. Anyway, I got out of rehab, started walking, hiking a bit. I never thought I'd be a runner, and it happened quite organically. Like, no one in my family is a runner. I didn't know any runners. It's sort of almost like this idea was one of the first ideas that just sort of arose organically, and I just kind of fell into it, and I loved it. You know, I was passionate about it because it gave me something to do. It distracted me, especially on the weekends, like when all my mates were still using drugs. You know, often I'd feel quite uncomfortable because, you know, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to feel my weekends? And running was the answer for me. So it was kind of like this solo pursuit, which was really intimate to my own healing journey, if that makes sense.
Of course.
It was like this metaphor for getting better. And, you know, I ran 1 kilometer one day, then I did 2, and then I did 5. I got stuck on 5 kilometers for about 6 months. I didn't think I could run any further. And one day I set out, woke up, and I'm like, today I'm going to run 7 kilometers, right? So I just got like a new watch, a little different to this one, but my Garmin watch, like, press the timer, and off we go. And I got 4Ks into this run, and I knew this loop, which was 10 kilometers, but I only told myself I'm going to run 7, right? And I'm just like, fuck it. Like, what if I just go for this loop and what if I could run 10 kilometers? And I was pretty convinced I couldn't. Like, I'd have to end up walking. And anyway, I go on this longer route, and I get like 7, 8Ks in, I'm still running. I'm like, holy shit. You know, I get to 9Ks, and like you said, like exactly how you probably feel now, the hips, the knees, it's all hurting. I got to 9Ks, and I was expecting, I'm running down this residential street, and I'm like waiting for people to come out the front and start clapping, you know? Like, it was such an achievement that I was about to run 10 kilometers.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was impossible for me. I thought other people could do it, but not me. I'm not a runner. I'm nothing special. And I ran 10 kilometers that day. And that was the start of my running journey. I thought, well, if I can run 10 kilometers, how far can I run, you know? So fast forward, 12, 15 Ks, signed up for my first half marathon. Was shit scared. The day before, I'm like, what am I doing? Again, all this fear came up. Who am I to think I can run this far? Went and did it, 15 Ks in, my legs completely locked up. It was this trail race at Wilson's Prom.
Oh, awesome.
Beautiful area up there. But lots of elevation, about 900 meters elevation in over 21 Ks, which is a lot for a race of that size.
For sure, yeah.
Anyway, 15 Ks in, my legs lock up, and I had to like crab walk the last 6 kilometers. Another runner came past. He's like, you all right? I'm like, not really. He's like, do you want some salt pills? I'm like, what are those? He's like, oh, they'll help you stop cramping up. So it was, you know, I learned a lot throughout my running journey. It was quite naive going into it.
You're just going
as
for
we
it.
all are. Yeah, finished that race. And again, like fell in love with trail running then. There's a certain kind of culture around trail running, which I just love. Everyone's so friendly and open and nice. I still love road running, but the trail, for me, works a lot better.
It's pretty awesome. Hey, like you're out in the bush, out in the mountains.
Yeah.
It's a good excuse to be in a beautiful environment. That's for sure.
Exactly right. So like you got that element of adventure,
Yeah.
that element of being out in nature. Like you're getting that cleansing feeling, getting away from technology, which is so valuable today.
Yeah.
Fine. It's like going on a power hike, but you're kind of running and walking. Anyway, finish that run. I'm like, what else can I do? So then I think a few months later, I ran 30 kilometers just around like where I live and completely like messed my foot up. I was on the couch for 2 weeks. I remember my boss was like, why'd you run 30 Ks? Like, he couldn't understand it. He thought I was crazy. So I worked in construction at the time and I couldn't work for 2 weeks. But there was something inside of me, that just wanted to keep pushing it because I knew when I pushed past the boundaries, it gave me confidence. That self-doubt would subside and it just empowered me to keep achieving more, not just in running, but in the rest of my life.
So that started to drip into every other area.
Aspect of my life, yeah. And to come from where I came from, you don't go into rehab because your life's perfect.
Yeah.
You go in most of the time because you have low self-esteem. You've just fought and lost an exhausting battle with drug addiction, which is, it's not a good place to be. If you feel for me, I felt very weak and small and like I wasn't capable of achieving anything anymore. So running kind of gave me the backbone to build my confidence. And anyway, so did that 30K run, recovered, and I kind of just took off from there. I ran my first marathon 6 months later. And I remember someone at that finish line said, there's two kinds of people, right? They both do marathons. The first one does a marathon and says, I'm happy I did that, but I'm never doing that again. And the second one doesn't say anything because they know that they've found what they love. And
you're going to keep going.
It. And I was the second one. And I did a few more marathons after that over the next year, a few shorter distances, but I just built up. I did a whole bunch of races between then and now. I think I've done about 17 or 18 events.
17 or 18 events?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So quite a few. I've been pretty consistent with the running. I like at least 4 or 5 times a week, every week. Because I don't drink or use drugs. I'm never hungover. I'm always good to go in the morning.
Always ready.
I love the mornings. I think purely because of the fact, I never used to get to appreciate the mornings and be present in the mornings. I was always either hadn't slept and was really drug affected or really hungover or just feeling like shit.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to appreciate those things. I'm sure you can relate to this. Like it's often
100%, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't gone through maybe necessarily the same thing as you, but I've definitely missed a lot of mornings for being up too late. That's for sure. And tell you what, the older you get, the more appreciation you get. Yeah. Like I want to see as many sunrises as possible.
Exactly. And I think the whole concept of we often appreciate the things most in life once we've realized what life's like without them. Like you don't often, what's that song quote? You don't appreciate what you got till it's gone.
100%, yeah.
Sometimes if it's gone and then you get it back, like you really appreciate it. And for me, that's the weekend, that's the mornings, getting up early.
It's a gift, right? Because if we take that same saying, there's a lot of things that once we lose it, it's never coming back. It's gone. You realize, and it's a hard learnt lesson that can't necessarily be fixed in that circumstance. Maybe you can apply it to other things, but something like running and getting your mornings back, like the sunrise is always going to be there and the mornings are always going to be there. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I wanted to ask.
Go for it.
Because how many laps did you do of this track?
About 400, yeah.
400. Did you have to change direction?
Yes, I did.
So like, I don't know. I could imagine if you're running on one side, that can really fuck your body up.
You're going to end up with one leg really long and one really short.
For sure. So you did have to change direction.
Yeah, for 2 reasons: to look after my body, so it didn't go lopsided.
Yeah.
For the second reason, just to keep myself sane. So I change about every 3 hours during that run. But yeah, since I did those few marathons, I did a 50K, 56K run, and then a 106K run. And then here we are. Last weekend did the 160.
Man, incredible. Are you going to do more? Do you want to like how far do you want to push the distance sort of thing?
Yeah. So I don't know. Like that question's always been yes previously.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me if I keep pushing past it. But the goal was always to enjoy it. But 100 miles was always like this impossible feat. And now I've done it. It's kind of like, oh, now what?
Yeah.
You know, that's honestly something that I wasn't sure I could achieve.
How did you?
It was always the end goal.
How did you feel leading up to this? Because we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but you put yourself out there publicly that you were going to do this before the fact, which can potentially put a lot of pressure on, right?
Did put a lot of pressure on. There was a lot of fear and self-doubt arising, which was really overwhelming. You know, I've had fear and self-doubt before every other run, but not to this extent. I think purely the fact that I did tell people raised money from work, family, friends were putting in money, driving hours to come down to watch me run. There was a lot of pressure I was feeling. Like if I get 50 Ks in and something blows up, like I'm going to be like publicly humiliated, right? And I know that's not the thought I'd want to buy into, but I needed to acknowledge that's still a fear, right? Like as humans, I think we're wired to have that fear of failure. But I realized in that journey that through this other ultra runner, Sally McRae, I listen to a lot of her podcast. And in one of her podcasts, she said there's two different kinds of things. So you've got the fear of failure. So there's failing and there's quitting.
Mm.
She said quitting's when we don't even try because we're afraid that it's not going to work out. Failure's when we have a really good crack. We do our best and we come up short. And I thought,
fuck, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, man.
I needed to hear that.
Splitting them into those two categories. I haven't heard it said like that before, but I can really connect with that. I've been I used to race BMX back in the day at a pretty high level, and that decision would come up a lot of it's fucked, especially when you're a teenager, but those thoughts definitely crept in of the thought of, and this is just inside my own mind, right? But the thought of, well, if I don't give it 100% right now, if I give it 90% or I give it 80%, it means that if I do lose or I don't do as well as I'm expected to do, then at least I know that I didn't try. So that's why I didn't win. You know what I mean? There was kind of this get out of jail free card of this excuse that I could make to myself. It's like, oh, it's all good. I didn't win because I didn't. It's a fucked up thought process, but it makes sense at that point in time of like, all right, well, if I hold back a bit, at least if I don't win, I've got that excuse to myself, which no one gives a fuck about at all besides yourself. But it's weird how excuses like that can begin.
Yeah, I had a similar excuse going into this run. The get out of jail free card was, well, I didn't train as hard as I usually do.
Yeah.
Because I didn't. Like I planned to do this run in January and then kind of forgot about it. The year crept by as it does, and it was about 6 weeks before the run. I just finished a couple half marathons and I thought, fuck, like I'm meant to be running 100 miles in 6 weeks. And my training load wasn't as high as it should be. Like previously for that 100K race, I was running about 100 Ks a week for about 10 weeks. Before this run, I only did 3 85K weeks, which is still quite a lot, but relatively for an ultra runner, that's quite low. And I was reading up articles online, like how many Ks a week should you be running, before you do a run like this, and it's all like at least 140, and I'm running 80, and I'm like,
fuck.
Yeah, just like advice out there, don't go Googling stuff if you're if you're scared about it. It never goes well. I'm reading stuff like, you're going to be limping, you're going to something's going to lock up, you're not going to be able to do it. And like back to that self-doubt and fear, I just want to kind of talk about that because it was so strong. Like it was really overwhelming. I knew I didn't want to go into the race like feeling like doubtful. So I needed to be confident going in.
Of course.
So I was almost trying to push away this fear and this uncertainty and this doubt I had around that maybe I can't do this, maybe I'm going to fail. And it was almost like the race before the race, like mentally it had already started. It was keeping me up at night. It was making me feel like quite anxious throughout the day. Even seeing posters of the run that I made, I was like, oh, I don't want to look at that. It's like my body was preparing before the run. My mind was spinning out.
Yeah, like your body knows it's about to go through some serious trauma.
Yeah.
And your mind's trying to deal with it somehow. How do you deal with that? How do you get through that initial stage before doing something big? How do you push through?
I found meditation really helpful for me. Like I've been meditating most mornings almost for about 4 years. And I think just creating that space between thoughts, feelings, and being aware of them can be incredibly useful. So even though I was feeling the fear and uncertainty, I could kind of do my best to just observe it and be aware that it's going to pass, like, not get so caught up in the feelings of overwhelm. Just observe, acknowledge they're there, I get it. But like I acknowledge that you're there, but I don't need you for this run.
How do you deal, and this might get into the weeds a little bit, but with that process of trying to create space, between the thoughts that are just happening to you and you meditating and creating space between those thoughts necessarily affecting you. I've found that and this is not to say that I've experienced what you've experienced, but if I think into my own experience, I've found that one part of me is able to make distance from the thoughts, but sometimes it's really difficult to create distance from the physical feeling, like the physical feeling of anxiousness or stress or whatever comes up before you're about to go through something big. Once that seeps under your skin and into your heart, how do you go about chilling that feeling out? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good point, because I don't know for me, if I can create a distance between me and my feelings, like what resist persists, right? So the more I resist a physical sensation, the stronger it becomes. If I can just lean into it and be like, I'm anxious, let's see what happens if I lean into it and just embrace it. Tends to be a bit easier. But in terms of actually like being sort of okay with those feelings and kind of to put them at ease, like deep breathing I can find helpful. Sounds simplistic, but it's incredibly effective. And we can get onto this later, but that's something I actually teach people in the line of work I do. I'm currently working at a detox.
Amazing.
For people often in their first week of treatment. And recovery is all about connecting from the head to the heart and calming the nervous system and leaning into emotions. So I'm really passionate about this stuff. Yeah, it's.
I definitely want to get into that, because that's a space that I'm incredibly interested in. I think it's one of the most powerful spaces that we can have, because I mean, when it comes to trying to deal with any sort of problem at all in life, it's usually it's usually just a feeling that's happening in your body, like if you even have the power to strip away all the thoughts that are happening about whatever situation, it's that feeling that's fucking sitting somewhere in your body that just keeps, if the feeling isn't addressed, I feel like it starts to kind of create its own thought cycle
100%.
Again, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I had a mate tell me that, and it was so valuable. It's like we tend to overthink things because we're not comfortable with what we're feeling. It's like if we're not comfortable with the physical sensations in our body, whatever they might be, we're going to create this mental dialogue to kind of, as a way of trying to escape the physical feelings. But as we know, all that does is drive us nuts.
Well, it exacerbates the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the worst.
For me, it's definitely exacerbated the problem. It's like, I'm feeling on edge. I'm feeling a bit off for whatever reason. And I've got this tension in my body. And then you're trying to explain it away. And I've always found that as soon as I do that, I start to pick up other areas of my life that are completely unrelated. And it's like, maybe this is the reason, or maybe this part of my life is the reason, or maybe what's the reason for this thing that I'm feeling right now? And it's kind of like the more that I look for answers, the more it kind of exacerbates that problem a lot of the time.
Yeah. So do you mean sort of like overanalyzing things sort of, or?
Yeah. Overanalyzing, or finding something that wasn't the problem and isn't the problem and turning it into the problem, you know? So
yeah. Sure.
I don't know, for an example, let's say I've had an argument with a friend, or, there's something like that's happened that's causing me to kind of stress out about it. And then that seeps into some self-worth issues or something like that. It's like, well, fuck, why did I act like that? Why did I do that? Or maybe I should have treated it a different way. Or maybe it's because I'm like this. Oh, the reason I'm like this is because of this other scenario. Or it's maybe I'm stressed out because of work. And it's like, all right, well, I'm bringing work into the mix with that problem. Let's bring in the problems with my other relationships in as well and chuck them into the mix of why I fucked up this one situation. You know, so it can snowball sometimes.
I'm laughing because I think we all do it. We just bring in the baggage, you know, from our lives into the present, and it just
for sure. And it feels to me like a lack of mental understanding, or maybe not just mental, but the whole process of thoughts to feelings. Just a lack of understanding of that process, or not a lack of understanding, but forgetting. It's really easy to forget. I've found how to mentally and emotionally deal with any sort of problem. Like sometimes in life you're feeling hot and it's like, oh, I'm on top of it. I understand how to move through these feelings in the right way and turn them into something good. But sometimes you just fucking forget.
It's a really good point, because I just want to highlight here, like I've been doing this sort of work for 4 years and I still get it wrong all the time. Like it's often till after the fact I realize what's going on. And like an example is I still deal with anxiety and overwhelm on a daily basis. Some days it's almost feels like it's not there, but other times it's really overwhelming. And it's like I get halfway through the day and I'm trying to like get through my to-do list and I don't know what to do next. It's like, do I do this or that? I go left or right. And I'm just like, oh, like really like overwhelmed, but I don't even know I'm overwhelmed. And it takes like a couple hours, or it's getting shorter now. But the point is, it's like it's really hard to work it out. And then it's not till like half an hour later, a few hours later, I'm like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, maybe I'll take the dog out for a walk. Maybe I'll go for a walk down the park and call a mate. I think for me, doing gentle things, and back to your question before, like how do we calm ourselves down when we notice that we're feeling uncomfortable? I think for me, it's that self-compassion, you know, and doing things which are gentle on me. And often that's going for a walk or heading down to the park, calling a friend. Sometimes it's going for a run. Depends.
Because do you believe that it's the same for everybody, or everyone's got to find their own thing that works for them, or their own set of tools to be able to deal with themselves?
I'd say it'd be different for everybody. Yeah. Like who am I to speak on behalf of 8 billion people, you know? But I think there are common trends that seem to help. Like, for example, just exercise, getting outside in nature, spending less time on the phones, power of community, friendships, having some sort of goal or making meaning out of our lives. That stuff seems universal. But in terms of the actual specifics, like what tools to use at what times a day to deal with what emotions, I think that depends on the individual and their interest and their personality.
Something that's got to be discovered and learned.
Themselves, yeah. Not told by someone else, but discovered themselves.
Yeah.
So I always encourage people to try new things, like especially the people I work with in treatment. Just try new things.
Just get out there.
Yeah. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's the only way you're going to grow and find out what you like.
Yeah. So from here, man, if you're comfortable speaking about it, I would love to just kind of hear the trajectory of your experience from and I don't want to say too much because I want you to use your own own words, but I would love to get a little bit more clarity, because I think it could be helpful or insightful for people to get a bit more understanding what it's like for someone who is going through or has gone through drug addiction, or someone who knows a friend, or someone who doesn't know anything about it at all. Often I feel like it's not talked about very clearly, you know? So it's hard to know exactly what that process is like.
Sure.
So I'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, no worries at all. I mean, I know we mentioned before this started, like I mentioned this idea of stigma, that there's no malicious intent behind it. Like people aren't trying to hurt people through stigma. It's simply a lack of understanding. It's like, how could you expect someone to understand what it's like being addicted to drugs if they haven't been addicted to drugs or they don't know anyone that has been. And like, let's be honest, from the surface, people who are addicted to drugs can be often quite annoying. They're really unreliable, quite messy. For some people can like to be center of attention or just chronically isolate. Like on the surface, I completely understand that drug addiction can look messy and chaotic because it is.
Yeah.
But I've learned through my experience, there's a lot more there. And often it's just people in pain and using drugs to cope. Just like other people would use food or sex or shopping. You know, there's various ways addiction can manifest. But yeah, sure, I'd love to speak on sort of how I got from 4 years ago, 2020, I was almost homeless, living out of my car, addicted to methamphetamine and various other substances. I lost the ability to feel human. I was lying to myself, my parents, my closest friends. I felt really lost and confused while I was in so much pain. I knew I wasn't a bad person, but the way I was behaving and the things I was doing made me think otherwise. And yeah, it was in a really tough place. I just fought and lost an exhausting battle with drugs and reached a breaking point. And then 4 years later, I'm running ultra marathons, working in a job that I love, got great people in my life. The relationship with my family is better than ever. I can honestly say I've left all the baggage I ever once had, completely free of my past, confident in who I am. I'm still learning a lot. I feel very much like a baby in some aspects. Like they say in recovery, you know, each year clean is like the start of your life. So I'm almost 4 years clean. So I'm about 3 years and 10 months old, you know, in terms of the learning development of my life. And it really feels like that, which is a beautiful thing because I get excited to learn. I'm okay with not knowing. I find the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. I'm not the only person that's gone through this. Like there's millions of people who have gone through drug addiction. I'm just one small cog in a bigger machine of recovery.
Yeah.
And that's my life today, man. Like it's all recovery based, you know, and I love that. I wouldn't want it any other way. From the running to the social connections to the work I do, it's all promoting that there is a life beyond pain and suffering through drugs.
In those, and incredible, by the way, man, incredible.
Thank you.
In those initial stages, what do you believe was the most difficult part about making that change or making that pivot where you wanted to, I guess, begin the journey of recovery? Like, what's the most difficult part in those? Maybe you could speak better to the time frame, but whether it's the first week or the first month or the first 2 months, like, what's the most difficult part about changing at that point?
Contemplating the idea of complete abstinence is terrifying for anyone dependent on substance. So even this idea of not using drugs at all, it's terrifying because it means that I have to face all the shit I've been running away from my whole life. And I didn't really know that walking into my first day on rehab. All I knew is kind of like what we were talking about before. I had uncomfortable feelings, which were like at 11 out of 10. Couldn't sit with myself. And I knew from my experience, whenever I stopped using drugs, all this stuff would come up to the surface and it was really uncomfortable. And that's where the fear grew, you know, and it was pretty ingrained in me by the time I tried to stop. So that was definitely the hardest part, just wrestling with the idea of going to rehab even before I went. And I can definitely touch on that. But I'd like to go back and sort of just explain my journey.
Yeah, please.
If that's all right. So how I got addicted to drugs, because I came from a good family, grew up in the northeast suburbs in Melbourne. Everything seemed pretty normal, you know, until about the age of 13. I was quite smart in primary school. Even year 7, I was smart, but I got bullied a lot. You know, growing up, I never thought I'd become addicted to drugs. I actually specifically remember thinking, I'm never going to become addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
You know, I knew they were bad. That giraffe, you know, Harold from the Life Ed van, came to my primary school and he said,
"Fuck, dude."
Do you remember that guy?
Yeah, you've taken me back.
Yeah.
Harold. Harold?
Yeah, Harold the giraffe, I believe.
Holy shit.
I think that's his name.
Yeah. Anyone our age is going to be getting flashbacks right now. Fuck, yeah.
But for anyone who doesn't know, it was this giraffe, like there was a puppet, which was orchestrated by a person, and someone else had come to primary schools and explained as well as you can to someone of that age what drug addiction can look like and why to be mindful. And I remember in primary school, they talked about this idea of if you use drugs or alcohol, you're going to feel really good up here, but then eventually it's going to stop working and your baseline will drop and you'll need to keep using just to be in the middle. And I fully comprehended that. I was like, sure, I'm not going to use drugs when I grow older, you know. Get to 13 years old, I've just been bullied really bad for the whole year. This was at St. Helena in year 7. And that really traumatized me looking back. I think this idea of being a man and not showing emotions and just like tough shit, suck it up. You know, I grew up in that culture. A lot of people still do, of like stoicism and not showing emotions.
Yeah.
And so I didn't show or really talk about it that much. Like I told people at the school and my mum I was getting bullied a lot, and I moved high school into year 8. That really affected me, but I didn't know it back then, how much that would impact my life. Start of year 8, I've recreated this person. You know, I went to Altham High School, there was free dress, so I was wearing fluoro trackies, fluorescent clothing, you know, was this larger than life character. I had to reinvent myself to feel accepted. Because the message I got from being bullied was, if I am authentically myself, it's going to hurt because people are going to attack me. So I traded my authenticity for survival. And I believe there's this great Hungarian, I think like a physicist or maybe he's a psychologist. Anyway, he's called Gabor Mate, and this is his theory. Yeah. You've probably heard about him.
I've heard of him. I've listened to a couple podcasts of him, but I wouldn't say that I know too much.
Yeah, so I believe he's a psychologist, but he's an amazing man who's done lots of work on addiction. And his theory is, which I subscribe to, is people will always trade their authenticity to survive for attachment. Like as humans, we need to attach to our parents. And this is when childhood trauma comes into it. But anyway, for me, it was in the form of not being accepted in my peer group. So I traded my authenticity, created a new person.
Something that they would
accept. Which at the time just felt like being a teenager, you know, being confused, like who am I, figuring myself out. I'm 13 years old.
Well, it's hard when you're young because if you haven't done it before, you don't even realize that that's what you're trading.
Yeah.
Do you?
Exactly. I didn't have that word in my backpack, you know.
Yeah, of course.
Authenticity. I knew drugs were bad, but when I got introduced to them in year 8, I think I just wanted to fit in, you know. So it started off drinking on the weekends. I love the feeling of just kind of letting loose, just like letting go and the alcohol taking over. I got caught smoking weed when I was like 14, which I'll never forget. My mum called me and said there was like pasta for dinner, and I went home on a school night. I don't even know why I smoked, reflecting back on it. Had the munchies. Got home and mum gave me the talk because mum used to be a bit of a smoker too. She stopped now, but growing up, she knew what to look out for, and she drilled it into me. You don't want to get addicted to drugs, because she was, you know, addicted for a few years, mostly to weed. I don't want to paint a bad picture of my mum. She's a lovely woman. She just got into weed. That was pretty much it. And the whole time I grew up, she quit smoking. She's been pretty much substance-free besides alcohol. So they've been really good for me, my parents. But back to sort of how I felt. Yeah, when I wanted to fit in, started drinking, and it was very progressive, right? And I think this is the important part. It wasn't like this instant downhill trajectory. It's like, it was kind of like, and I explain this to people I work with, my life slowly got worse. Hopefully the camera can see this. Sort of like, it get worse and then it get better. Then it get worse and get better and get worse. And because it would get better every now and then, it didn't feel like it was getting worse. So I couldn't see that my life just slowly disintegrated. So it happened very slowly. I went from drinking once every 6 months to once a month. By year 9, I'm drinking most weekends, getting completely wasted. I was a bit of a class clown, you could say. I love making people laugh. I wasn't afraid of substance, and I thought that made me really cool. You know, I wore it like a badge of honor. It helped me fit in and helped me find my identity. So by year 9, like I was kind of known as someone who would drink and smoke a lot on the weekends. And I love that, you know, like it helped me fit in. It gave me confidence.
It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah,
in
and
a lot of ways.
it's a cool thing to do when you're that age, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know how many younger people are going to be listening to this, but, you know, I'm sure they could relate. Like at that stage of our lives, we just want to fit in. We want to, you know, chase the girls or the boys, you know, it's whatever your preference is, but we just want to fit in and feel okay in the world. And for me, I didn't know that's what I was trying to do, but now I can see in hindsight. And you can probably picked up as well. There's a lot I've learned in hindsight, which from rehab on, like my life completely changed. And I learned a lot about myself. But just to fast forward from that period of in year 9, about 15 years old, I got in a 5-year relationship, maybe 4 or 5 year relationship. And over that time, my drug use increased, caused a lot of problems in that relationship, started to cause problems at work, or at school, sorry. I was like falling asleep in class. I'd still show up and sit at the front of the classroom. But when you start smoking every day, which I did in year 10, I started to use drugs every day. At the time, I was just smoking weed every day, flat out.
Yeah.
After school, drinking on the weekends. It started to affect me, but it wasn't really a problem yet. By year 12, I was selling drugs. I was selling weed at school. I was drinking, wiping myself out still most weekends. I'd go through phases of enjoying drinking more, thinking I'm a social butterfly, to stuff that I'm just going to smoke flat out because it's cheaper and it's healthier for you. So you can see the justifications are already creeping in.
Yeah.
You know, why I'm using.
Yeah, there's a way to explain it all that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that justification and the denial and the rationalization, that's all stuff I've learned in my recovery journey, which is absolutely typical of anyone where that addiction becomes a really bad part, becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Right? So at the end of year 12, I experienced a breakup from that person I was with. And because I was pretty, I think, screwed up inside from my childhood, being bullied, feeling like I couldn't be myself, I had sort of this attachment, like I needed to feel loved and okay, and I didn't deal with that breakup well. And I kind of spiraled. The heartbreak was too much. When I say spiraled, probably more accelerated. Like I often say, I put the foot down on the gas on my drug use and I started hitting the clubs every weekend. Most people finishing high school are probably thinking about having a gap year or what they want to study. For me, it was just so overwhelming. Like fear and overwhelm and anxiety have been consistent throughout my life, and they still are today, but I deal with them differently. But as an 18-year-old, I was at this pivotal moment of my life where I could have addressed that stuff, but I don't think I was ready to. But instead I was in pain from that breakup. And I don't want to like paint a bad picture of the woman I was with then either, or like the breakup.
Course.
This was all my own stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I was only 18 years old. I got a lot of compassion for that dude now. He didn't know any better, but I was about to go through hell the next 7 years. And I'm glad I didn't know it back then, because if I had to go back, I would do it all over again, but I'm happy I didn't know, you know?
Yeah.
Because it has made me the person I am today, which I'm so grateful for. But what happened was I started using more drugs, got into ecstasy, ketamine, cocaine, started clubbing all the time. Thought I was really cool. Maybe not so much really cool, it just helped me fit in, you know, like it gave me a sense of purpose on the weekends. It was about getting on drugs. I tried to moderate it because I knew I should be doing something with my life as well. I mentioned I came from a good family. So I started a few apprenticeships, electrical, plumbing, carpentry. But I had so much anxiety at work. It was just so hard to focus and concentrate. I was terrified by the men I was working with. They're often pretty hard, you know, working in construction.
Yeah.
Need thick skin. I've always been incredibly sensitive. So it wasn't a good mix. I couldn't talk about the fact I was addicted to drugs because of the stigma. I thought it meant you're weak. And that was the first time I started trying to quit using. You know, I was trying to get off smoking every day. So I started using ecstasy. And then I tried to get off that. I'd start drinking more. I could see it was causing me a lot of anxiety, particularly in the mornings. But it also helped me alleviate my anxiety. So it was like this catch-22 was happening already, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like you got to trade one for the other. no matter how you do it, you're arriving in the same position to some degree.
Yeah, well, like it was helping me with my anxiety, but it was also causing it.
Yeah.
So I didn't stop using because I couldn't. It's not because I didn't want to. And I think for me, this is really important to highlight. People often think drug addiction is a choice and burning your life down to the ground is a choice. And it's definitely not. And I know that because at age 19, I was smart enough to know that I want to stop using drugs. And most people would have. We all go through phases, you know, some more than others. There's a spectrum of addiction. I'm at the top end.
Yeah.
Some people might be in the middle. I'm sure most people listening to this have gone through phases where they thought, well, my drug use or drinking is getting a bit out of hand. And they stop. They seek help and they stop. But for me, no matter how hard I tried, and like I tried every day for 7 years to stop, I couldn't. And it was the worst feeling in the world. Like when you wake up in the morning and you promise yourself, today is going to be the day that I kick this addiction and I don't use because I want to be there for myself and the people I love and do something with my life. And then in the afternoon, you feel possessed or like hypnotized or something. It's like the thought comes in and it's like, fuck, I don't want to use, but the thought goes, well, we're going to anyway. And then when you go, okay, we'll use, then you convince yourself that's what you wanted to do. It's this illusion. It's this, illusion's the best word for it that most people with addiction go through. It's this inner confliction of not wanting to, but then doing it. So I knew at that age, like this isn't a good route to go down, but I just couldn't stop. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how many therapists I spoke to.
Oh, so you're actively getting professional help at this point in time.
Yeah, but to be honest, it wasn't on my own accord. Like it's not that I really wanted to. I think a part of me wanted to, and this comes back to that inner confliction, but a part of me knew that drugs were helping me cope with all this confusion. So my mum was with me this whole journey, and she went through drug addiction just as much as I did. Often our families do. And she pushed me to go to see a therapist from the age of probably 17 up till 25. It wasn't all the time. It was usually when things got worse. I was pretty reluctant to go, but I knew that I don't know if I wanted to completely stop at age 19, but I wanted to just be normal, just drink occasionally. I wanted to achieve things with my life. And what happened was my life just got worse. I ended up using harder drugs. I got on the speed and I thought, this is great. I don't feel messy from the come down like I was on pills. Got into DJing. That made me feel accepted. I could get a gram of speed and relatively cheap as well, or a quarter gram, and just use all weekend, stay awake, feeling like a god, to be honest. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. That's just how we feel when we're on these drugs.
Yeah. And you're in that environment, like you're in the middle of a club and you DJ and that's the norm.
Totally, yeah.
It's the norm. Like people might say, oh, it's not, but you go into any club in Melbourne, like that's what's going on.
Yeah, everyone's using drugs, feeling top shit.
And if you're a DJ in the middle of it, you are top shit in a lot of ways in that environment.
Yeah, and that's how it felt. But deep down, I knew that it was all based on bullshit, Like I knew that I was still that 13-year-old boy who got bullied.
So there's the, I don't know the right way to say this, so I'll just say it, but
go for it.
But there's the real you underneath, the you that hasn't been affected by any of this shit, who still has some sort of a view on it all, just watching it happening while you've got this.
I got goosebumps. You explained that so well.
Well, you've got just this internal dialogue, this internal battle going on of different parts of yourselves, and you're just back inside watching, hey? Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm off my head on speed in a nightclub and everyone's cheering. Like, that's pretty distracting,
Yeah, fuck.
It's like life was fun, from using drugs, sex, like women, catching up with mates. Like it was very, it was all that quick dopamine release. It was all that really stimulating. It's easy to get caught up in and convince myself, this is who I am. This is what I want to be doing. And it just got worse. I ended up using not just when I was DJing, but Mondays and Tuesdays, Thursdays, I'd take off work just to use. it was fun on one hand. Like whenever I started using harder drugs, I got more relief, which made it feel more fun. And for me, that was the best part about using drugs. Not just feeling confident, but just letting loose. Like I could just walk in somewhere, use, snort, smoke, whatever, and just relax the shoulders and be like, I don't care what we're doing. I'm just happy I'm here.
You're just happy to be there doing that.
Fully present.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to acknowledge as well. I often ask the people that I work with in drug treatment, like, what do you like about using? What does using drugs, like what's the purpose it serves for you? Because often people don't get asked that question.
And what's the answer?
For me, it made me feel connected with other people, made me feel part of, made me feel confident, made me feel okay in my own skin, so relaxed.
Bit of peace.
Bit of peace, yeah. And ultimately, for me, it made me feel loved. That might sound strange, but like when you have a bunch of ecstasy, you feel nothing but unconditional love for yourself, for your mates. I was so hooked on using pills at one stage of my life, just of that love feeling. Because ordinary life was so jarring and rough and anxiety fueled and pressure. Like, what am I going to do with my life? All this expectation. If I could just roll around on a couch with a few mates on the weekend at 2 a.m, high on ecstasy, that was the best feeling in the world to me. Had no worries. I'd say I love you to a mate and I meant it. Like even though it was drug fueled, it doesn't mean it wasn't real. Like sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, the drugs experiences aren't real. Well, they are real to me. It's still happening in reality. It's not like I'm dreaming it, but they're not sustainable. It's like you can't keep doing it and expect it to keep working the way it is.
You're taking it from somewhere.
Yeah.
Borrowing from somewhere. Because then you're getting all of those feelings, but then as soon as you're not on it, it's almost inverted.
Yeah, gets worse.
Gets worse each time.
Yeah. And I got good at like kind of trying to make it not as bad, like the come down through mixing drugs together. It's called polydrug using, a bit of a fancy word, but it's just essentially not having one particular drug as a preference. And that was me. I'd use whatever gave me the most relief. So I'd get on the speed on the weekends at this stage of my life at 22 years old. Had some ketamine just to make it a bit more interesting. Bit of coke, whatever, some Valiums to help me calm down, bit of weed during the week. I'd always be drinking or using or something just to find that relief. It wasn't always about having fun. I thought it was, but it was just about having a bit of peace, having a bit of, just being okay.
Yeah. And then eventually you find it sounds like you found a way to medicate the whole process.
Yeah. Got pretty good at it.
Fuck.
That's the thing about drug addicts. They're pretty good at using drugs until they're not.
Yeah, of course.
Pretty good at finding a way. There's often skills people develop in active addiction which they might not be aware of until they get sober. Like we really do as addicts go to any length and means to find drugs. Like even on the drive over here, I don't know where it was, somewhere in the city, just about 45 minutes from home. Like I drove past somewhere that I picked up drugs from one day. And I remember at this stage of my life, I was completely broke, barely had enough money for food or fuel. I think I had about $40 left to my name. And I went and picked up $40 worth of speed. And I remember the drive and just thinking like, what am I going to do after this? And I drove all the way out to the spot I drove past today in the city, picked it up. It was shit speed. Yeah. I was really pissed off about it. Yeah. But I just felt so pathetic, like that's what my life ended up looking like. It was just one hit at a time, one episode of relief. So I think from the age of 22 to 25, things really spiraled. And this is when it went from bad to disastrous. I started to isolate a lot more. I started to use drugs in a way that it wasn't just about finding relief. It's like I had to find relief. There was a sense of urgency, even in my mannerisms. It's like I'd get the drugs and I'd use them in the car straight away before I got home. I'd get there with a mate and I'd just be kind of tapping, waiting until the drugs come around because I need them to be okay. It was still fun, but it felt gross the way I was operating. Because like you said, that part of me was still there that knew like this is some pretty unsavory behavior,
Yeah.
like pull up a bit.
Yeah.
But I couldn't, no
So
matter.
you're still aware to some degree of what's going on.
To some degree, yeah. But by this stage, I'm so caught up in it. I've been using drugs for, pretty daily from the age of 15, experimental from the age of 12, 13. So 15, about 7 years, this habit had been ingrained, that those neural pathways in my brain, that reward system had developed quite deeply. So it was hard to break that. And the shame I felt, the shame around that I couldn't stop, especially around my family and friends. They tried to pull me up by this stage.
Are they all aware at this point? Or are you hiding?
They're aware that I'm addicted to drugs and I go out and spend all my money on the weekend using, and I'm pretty sloppy and often break down because I don't have enough money for fuel in my car.
Yeah.
Like I was just kind of known as that guy who's just, drugs are a bit of a problem and maybe a lot of a problem. I'm probably minimizing it. I'm sure from the outside looking in, people knew a long way before I did.
Yeah.
I'd had all the women I loved in my life had left me because of drugs. And that was so painful to deal with. I think that's a big part of my journey, feeling that heartbreak and not being able to feel it. It's too much, so I'm going to use more. I remember I had a bad breakup when I was 22 maybe. And I just kind of been using speed that seemed to be stronger. It seemed to be stronger than usual, kept me up for longer. I thought it was great, but I was a bit skeptical. But it wasn't ice. Ice was always out of the question. I knew people that had used methamphetamine. The name itself was like you don't want to be messing about.
Carries a lot more weight.
Yeah, a lot more stigma.
Of course.
Like if you're using ice, it's not really a social thing for a lot of people. Most people are like, what are you doing? And that's how I felt about it. And the weird thing was I was using ice from the age of 21 to 23 and I didn't even know. I thought it was speed because people were selling it, calling it speed. And my mum worked in the court system and she was telling me that they're getting lots of drug cases where people were like, the manufacturers behind ice are now just branding it as speed because I know people will take speed that won't take ice. And it was kind of half cut. Speed's often more powdery, ice is more crystals. But if you crush up crystals, it looks like powder. So, yeah, that was a rough realization.
Holy shit, man. It's a fucking hectic journey. It's a hectic journey. And so you're going through this and you're watching, you're watching other parts of your life kind of fall apart to facilitate this process.
Break down in front of my eyes, watching myself do things I'd say I never do. The bar just kept dropping for what success would look like in my life. Couldn't hold down a job. I went through about probably 20 jobs, And I got a lot of empathy for that dude, like I said before, and compassion, because I was just anxious. Like I wasn't a bad person. Makes me quite emotional thinking about it, because back then I thought I was a bad person. I thought I was weak. I'm like, why, Jesse, do you keep fucking up every job, every relationship? Like, what is wrong with you? And this is why I'm so passionate about, not just telling my story, but being part of a recovery community and helping others. Because people need to know that it's not your fault if you're addicted. If you choose to use drugs, that's your choice. But most people experiment. A lot of people don't get addicted. Only some people do.
Yeah.
And still why that is, it's up for debate. Some people think it's genetic. I believe it's more attachment-based or trauma-based. Trauma doesn't have to be this huge, big thing. Trauma can be something smaller. Like you and me could both experience the same thing and have completely different reactions, right? Like we could experience someone fall onto the train tracks, right? And then get up and be like, whoa, dust himself off. And for you might be completely fine with seeing that.
Yeah.
But that could set me off because I've seen something like that happen before and it didn't turn out well. So that's what trauma is as well, just to clarify. It's not what happened to us. It's what happened inside of us. So the things that happen to us are traumatic. Trauma is how do we respond to what we've just experienced? And that's going to be different for everybody depending on their life circumstances.
Yeah, well, it's really situational, isn't it? Because it's like in an extreme traumatic moment, it's like what's the coping mechanism that we put in play at that point in time seems to stick a lot of the time, right?
Exactly right.
For some people, drugs are the first thing there, or you're already experimenting with drugs, and then something fucked up happens, And that's the first thing that you realize that can help, as opposed to, I don't know, if you're already like a professional athlete or something and something fucked up happens, you realize that training extra hard is the thing that's going to help. You know, like
What's help you? Yeah.
What's the first coping mechanism that you put in place to ease your pain when you really, really need it?
For sure.
Seems to stick a lot of the time.
And maybe that could be as simple as it is, you know, for people, the difference between people that get addicted to drugs and don't. Maybe it's just that's their first coping mechanism they put in place.
I have not, potentially.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely one thing. I don't want to speak out of turn too much because I don't know.
No, that's all right. That's the interesting thing about addiction and recovery. No one really knows. It's all kind of speculation. Yeah, there's some evidence, but it's still a new body of evidence. Like it's still very much this new thing of trying to work out how to treat people with addiction, what causes it. So yeah, I really like that insight.
It's a weird one because, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people maybe listening to this who haven't been through it might think that it's purely just a willpower thing. You know, and once again, I don't mean to offend in any way, shape or form, but I could see how people would potentially look at people who are addicted to drugs and think, well, why don't you just have enough willpower to just get yourself out of it when you want to? You know,
sure.
Like the kind of just fucking do it mentality.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. To be honest, I've still got mates that use drugs, and that thought can cross my mind. You know? Why don't you just get your shit together and stop? But the thing is, some people don't want to stop because there's so much fear around stopping because you've got to face all your stuff. And for me, it always comes back to connecting with ourselves, and that's all the recovery journey, to connect with ourselves authentically, which is a journey, you know. It's a journey from the head to the heart. It's a journey of honesty and vulnerability, and it's a painful journey. It's not easy working through that stuff, and it's a journey everyone has to go through in life, regardless if you're addicted to drugs or not. It's the story of, I forget the name of the prodigal son, you know, goes off, bunch of strippers, gets up to all sorts of mischief. There's two sons, right? And one goes off and gets up to all this mischief and comes back. And the father's like rapt that this second son has come back because he's found again. And the first son was like, well, I was always here. Like, why are you so happy about him? He went off and messed up. But the father goes, but you see, like, he was lost and now he's found. And I think in all of us, there's that journey, you know, like sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find ourselves. Sometimes we need to fail to learn the lesson. I think as a recovering addict, that's why I'm so grateful that I believe this will be my biggest challenge in life, going through that 10-year period and finding myself. And it sets me up in a good place to deal with obstacles in the future authentically, and to support other people going through their own self-discovery journey, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
And I really want to kind of dive deep into this recovery aspect because I've got a lot of tangents I kind of want to take on it. But right before we do, if you don't want to speak to it, all good. But what was the catalyst? What was the moment that you had to go to rehab?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the pivotal moment, right?
Yeah, I think there were a few moments leading up to it, which compounded. Obviously, the 10 years of drug using. Yeah. Compounded over time. From about the age of 23 to 25, I mentioned things just got worse. And what that looked like was, I've touched on it a little bit, but I stopped hanging out with my friends. I started isolating. I openly speak about this. Like, I started watching a lot of porn as well, like on drugs, which was a really lonely thing to do. A lot of guys might hear that and be like, that's no big deal. I even had friends that said that to me. Like, so what if you're on drugs watching porn in your car on the weekend instead of showing up to life? But for me, that felt so painful because it was so isolating and there was so much judgment around, like, who does that? You know, it's like I had so little self-esteem that I no longer thought I was worthy or maybe I was just so fearful about actually interacting with women in real life. I'd been hurt so many times before. Every relationship I was in was just a disaster. I'd been with a few girls who'd like slept with friends, and this would keep happening. You know, I was always the common denominator. So what does that say about me, right? And this is all the recovery work. But at the time, man, like I just wasn't in a good place. Like I was in so much physical pain and mental anguish, and it was just like this harrowing sense of dread that like this train's at its final stop and I'm either going to die, I'm going to go to prison. I'd been arrested a few times and was so close. I'm going to go to rehab. And all three options terrified me. That's sort of the gist of it, you know, without it can be hard to articulate sometimes because it's so raw. Like,
of course.
Some people call it a rock bottom. But for me, it was just, I reached a place where enough was enough. Like, I had nothing left in my life anymore besides a few friends who were freaked out. They didn't even know what was going on, like the porn addiction going off, getting arrested by police. I had one day where I was being, I don't want to like paint this war story or anything. I just want people to get an idea of where I came from, right? Because I might see you know, who I am today and forget like where I've come from. Like there was one day in particular where I was having a drug psychosis and I was running around this bush for like 8 hours away from police because I was like trespassing on someone's property. This guy saw I was really unwell. I only had like half my clothes on me. I had no idea what I was doing. And they called police dogs, police helicopters. They were like chasing me down for hours. And I thought, this sounds like I'm making it up, right?
Yeah.
And I was hiding under this bush and these police cars were going past and my car was there. I was trying to get to my car and lock it up because I knew it was open and they're going to check my car and there's drugs and like pornography magazines and there's just like all this average stuff you wouldn't want police seeing in this car, right? And the police saw me and I run and I'm hiding behind this log and I buried myself under the ground at one stage, just dug like with my fingers to the point like my fingers were almost bleeding just to like hide. I was just so terrified and like curled up in a ball, like almost crying like, is this actually my life? Like, what am I doing? How did I get here? And eventually the police called my dad and my dad came and saw my car, saw what was in it. You can imagine how he'd react and he drove it home. And by the time I came out later on that day before it got dark, I spoke to the guy who saw me trespassing. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And he's like, what's wrong, mate? And he's like, are you a bit unwell? I remember hearing those words and thinking like, I'm so sick. Like, not in a degrading way, but just like, I'm really unwell, you know, like, and I think I said something like, it's quite sad when I think about it. I'm like, I just like making music. And at the time I was passionate about my hip hop and producing music, but I just wanted him to see that this is not who I am. There's another side to me. And anyway, my dad drove me home, went to the police station, got interviewed. It was just really traumatizing. And the most messed up bit is I went to work Monday in construction and the boys are like, how's your weekend? I'm like, oh, pretty sweet. Didn't get up to much. You know, and I'm going off to the lawyers at Smoko to go and speak about these serious charges. And I'm like half naked on this dude's property.
Yeah.
Like you can get locked up for this stuff and get put on the sex offenders list. Like it's serious stuff, you know. I'm like, I didn't want to hurt anyone. I was just soothing myself, you know. And it's not an uncommon story, like porn mixed with amphetamines. Lots of guys go down that route. I'm just happy I can speak about it because I've worked through it and I've let it go. That's why I can speak about this stuff today. And so that was one of the pivotal moments. There are a few more, and this all happened in a year. A few events like that, just so people can get an idea. It was hell. It was like I wasn't living my life anymore. You know, it's just kind of like watching this other person. And I think that was enough for that other part of me to go, I'm jumping in here. I'm pulling the brakes. You're going to rehab. And mum had been trying to get me into rehab for years. I said, I'll go. And I said I'd go when I was drug affected. So when I finally sobered up a week later, I didn't want to go. Yeah. Even the day before, I was shit scared, walked in, was shit scared. I remember sitting on the bed in rehab, looking up at the roof, and they give you Valium to calm you down, and just thinking like, how did my life get to this? You know, and there's a certain pride I had. Like, I got myself into this mess. I should have been the one to get me out. I didn't want help. I was really reluctant to accept help. But again, it was all conflicted this whole time. It's like at the same time I did want help, but the part that was trying to fight so hard to control my using was really stubborn and really prideful. Like the ego was so strong. And what happened the next few days was the most beautiful thing. My ego completely dissolved. I was so humbled, and I got hope. I got hope in the form of other people speaking on Zoom, talking about their journey and that they had been where I'd been before and they'd got out. And these were people I respected too, you know. These were like cool dudes, like in their 20s, had cool lives, looked attractive, looked like something I'd want. And they were telling me, it's all good. You're not a piece of shit. You're just sick and you've got a disease, and the disease is called addiction. And that's really where my recovery journey started. But the most pivotal moment before that was definitely, it's a quick story I'll just share with you. It was one night I was at a mate's house using drugs. I don't know what time it was, maybe 7, 8, 9 p.m. And my mum was on her wit's end. She was really distressed at this point of my life and our lives. And she sent me a text. And this was after I'd kind of promised I'd stop using ice, because I'd get off it for like 6 months, and I'd recently just got back on it. It was on like a binge, you could call it, where I wouldn't sleep for weeks, sometimes, you know, almost a month, and it was terrible. Like, anyway, mum texts me and she says, Jesse, I've just been crying all week at work because I finally realized that my son has finally given up on himself and that he's going to be addicted to drugs forever. And that cut through me like a knife through butter, you know. I just thought, and I just walked away from the music, went into a different room of the house, and I just sat there and cried, you know. And I cried because, yeah, I was hurting my mum, but I knew she was right, you know.
Yeah.
I thought, fuck, man, like, you've just finally given up. Like, I'd kind of just waved the white flag and been like, well, if I can't stop using drugs, fuck it, you know? Like, I accepted that I was probably going to die in my 20s or 30s, that ice was going to be a part of my life forever, this drug that I despised. And this whole, like, fight, it's like going to war for so long, and then finally you get so close, not even close, but then you just get defeated, you know? And it's just like, I think that sense of defeat was like, that was a tipping point. That was the difference between me going to rehab and not going to rehab. I'm so grateful I went, man, because...
Holy fuck, man.
Yeah, the most beautiful journey begins after that, you know? Like...
Well, before we continue...
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, man.
That's all right, man. I'm glad I could connect with it, because sometimes I can't. I just kind of feel like I'm speaking words about someone else. But I love when I can connect with my journey.
Of course. I can you're getting me, man. I think that, I mean, everybody goes through shit in different ways, different symptoms, different substances, different addictions. But I think most people could connect to your story in some way or another. This leads into the recovery portion, which I'm incredibly interested in, recovery and the process of it. I could be wrong in this, but it seems like it's potentially synonymous with the spiritual journey.
100%.
Or an element of it. You know, when I hear people's recovery stories and I hear people's stories of enlightenment, they sound like the same thing. A lot of the time, you know, it sounds like it's got very similar checkpoints in it, checkpoints of realizations. I don't know if you can speak to it, but you mentioned within those first few days of recovery, your ego dissolved, or what do you mean by that? Yeah,
I love that. That's what you chose to speak about, because for me, this is the most important part. And sometimes in the past, I've danced around this word spiritual because I think it can be a bit airy-fairy for some people. But I suppose I shouldn't worry about what other people think. For me, it was a spiritual awakening. That's the only way I can put it. And 110%, it is a spiritual journey. And that can mean different things to different people. But for me, it was connecting with this deep part of myself that was always present and the path that continues to guide me each day in recovery.
A spiritual awakening.
That's what my counselor called it. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, you've had a spiritual awakening. And I'm like, cool. And what that is in 12-step meetings, it's a change in perspective. So that's another way you can put it. Sure, individuals can, and I've done this, sort of gone from that path and done my own research and read spiritual books. I'm big into, different books from Michael Singer.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
I love that shit. I love that stuff when I was using as well, which is kind of interesting, right? And I was thinking about this the other day, I was trying to meditate. I was trying to run maybe once every 6 months. I was trying to do all these things when I was using, but I couldn't. So I developed this spring-loaded energy. It's what I mean by that, it's I was trying to go that way, but my drug use was pushing me the other way. And the more it pushed me back, the more I tried to go the other way.
Well, there's probably this thought, and you can tell me if this is what you experienced, but there's potentially a thought of, well, if I can do all the right things, I don't have to stop the bad thing.
Yeah, totally.
Right? If I can do all the right stuff, then maybe I don't have to give up.
Exactly.
I can make it all work.
Uh-huh.
Which is kind of like a constant battle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have that thought.
I have that all the time I have that all the time with different things. It's I do martial arts, and it's I want to train every day. And it's okay, but I also want to have the option to drink occasionally. And it's well, you fucking can't really. You drink too much and you wake up too hungover. You can't. You don't.
And was that a bit of a process for you to come to that realization, or?
I mean, I feel like I face that on everything that I want to do. There's the realization of potentially the sacrifices that I have to make to be able to do the things that I want. I think is always a tough realization, whether it's a big thing or a small thing. Right now, simply it feels like a big thing to me, but it's a small thing in the scheme of things. But just how you spend your time, there's a lot of things that I want to get done right now, and there's a lot of things that I want to get really good at right now, and I have to just keep winding myself back and being you're maybe not going to master all of these things at the same time. Fucking pick one, and it means give up on something else.
I can relate.
Yeah, just prioritization. Understanding the art of prioritization, and just realizing that for me, I have to let some things go so I've got time to really focus on the things that I want to do. So it's what's actually important to me? Because the 10 skills that I want to master I'm mastering none of them. So it's fucking pick one or pick two.
You familiar with Kipchoge?
No.
I'm not sure if he still holds the record, but he did for a long time as the fastest marathon runner ever.
Really?
It's an African man. And he's got
he the guy who cracked the 2 hours?
The sub 2 hour, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
I believe it was. I'm not 100%. I'm 99% sure. But he talks about the most important vitamin. It's vitamin N, which is vitamin no. Which is exactly what you're saying.
Saying no to stuff.
No to things.
100%, man.
That'd be hard.
That's been one of the biggest learnings for me over the last few years of just look, man, you got to choose. You have to make a decision of what is actually important to you and what you really want. Because pre-COVID for me, I was trying to do all of this stuff and overextend myself in so many ways and failed at fucking all of it, at the same time. And it's well, fuck. Imagine if I just focused on, in hindsight, you always know what matters. You look back and it's oh, well, why didn't I focus on this? Or why didn't I prioritize this? That's what was really important to me.
Yeah.
But I didn't, because I was chasing whatever it is.
Yeah.
Fame, glory, attention, whatever the fuck.
Sure, man.
You name it.
I feel like we live such a fast-paced lifestyle. We almost need to carve out those times to reflect and think about, what do I want? Like, what do I want to prioritize? Otherwise, it's kind of, as you say, we're swimming with our head down. We're just going for this thing we think's important. And that's always been my biggest fear, looking back 10, 20, 30 years from now and going, maybe I should have gone that way, or maybe it's not that I'm always going to make the perfect decision, but I want to make sure that the decisions I'm making are around the best intentions I can wholeheartedly think of at that period of time.
Of course, man. And I think it's something that I potentially brought up on a previous podcast, but I'm going to continue to reiterate this message because it's something that rings really true for me at the moment. And it's I've predominantly heard a guy named Joe Dispenza talk about it, if you've heard of him.
Yeah, sure have.
And he talks about the process of, or one type of meditation where you're, I guess, visualizing who you want to be, like trying to actually work out who you want to be so you can make the right decisions. And he talks about the process of if we're unclear of the direction that we want to take, often you're spending your days in decision fatigue. It's like, oh, should I go left? Should I go right? Should I start this? Should I start that? Should I watch TV? Should I read a book? And then you end up scrolling on TikTok for the whole time, right? There's this process where you don't understand what you want to do with your day, essentially. And then he talks about the process of flipping the scales of if you carve out enough time for yourself where you can sit down, relax, meditate, visualize, just think about your life and the actions you want to take. If you spend enough time doing that, you stop forgetting about the person you want to be and you start remembering more and more and more. When you've had those epiphany moments where you're like, oh, this is how I want to be. Like, this is the state of mind that I actually want. Like those times where you are locked in and you're like, I feel how I want to feel right now. And I've just remembered that these are the things that really matter to me. And I've just remembered these are the actions that I do want to be taking.
I had one of those experiences recently.
Yeah, man.
I went up to Byron Bay for a period of time on a yoga teaching course. And we just ate real clean food. Like, I ate a mixed diet, but there was strictly vegan food.
Yeah.
Clean water, really fresh water, doing yoga like 6 hours a day, meditating, half an hour a day, around beautiful people, beautiful place, all the food. A lot of it was organically grown on the property we were living. It was quite a rigid course, like 10-hour days. So we were highly disciplined. Kind of like those monks you hear about who are really disciplined. We were just laughing the whole time.
Yeah.
And my soul and my spirit just felt so clean. I felt I could show up almost with this glow, and the energy that was being transmitted between me and the other people there was just incredible. And I remember thinking, like, this is it. Like, this is how I want to feel all the time.
Yeah.
Realistically, I've got to work and earn money.
Of course.
But that was a great reminder. How can I create a life where I can access that state more often?
100%, man. And it's that when I'm in those moments, the priorities are clear. It's like, this is the kind of life that I want to live. I can't believe I've been wasting my time on all this other shit. And I think everybody would have that experience a bit. And I've always found in those moments of clarity, you suddenly realize how unclear you've been for the last week or month or fucking 2 years.
Totally.
It's like, have I been in a daze? I've just been walking around where the whole time, if I had this clarity, I could have been walking to where I wanted to go. And just that process of carving out a certain amount of time each day or week to remember. And like I mentioned, Joe Dispenza, he speaks about speeding up that process. So you start remembering once a day of who you want to be. And then you increase that until there's a moment where you don't forget. Like, you don't actually forget. You don't fall out of the clarity.
I love that.
I'd love to be able to do it all the time.
So powerful, yeah.
I can't.
That stuff gets me up in the morning hearing that.
Fucking oath, man. Like, I think that stuff's really important, and I've tried to practice that as much as possible of like, if I am aware at all times of what I'm doing, you don't make the wrong moves. Like you don't step in the wrong direction if you're clear about what's going on.
Yeah.
But fucking life happens, shit gets in the way, you get busy, you get tired, and autopilot kicks in again, and
Get snowballed up in emotions and pressures and expectations and
100%,
bustle
man.
and hustle of life. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it all happens, but just knowing that exists and there is a moment of you could be clear about what you want.
I love that. Like for me, that's
at all
such
times.
it's such like an awesome goal to aspire to. It's like my goal is not to do X, Y, and Z. My goal is just to be clear at all times about what I'm doing. Like,
Yeah, man, like all
unreal.
the dumb fucking decisions that I've made have come from a place where I haven't been fully aware. You know,
Yeah.
I've just been autopilot's kicked in. I haven't been aware of really what I've wanted out of life, and I haven't had my highest ideals in clear vision at those points in time. So like,
Oh,
what am I aiming towards?
yeah.
To you, what, like, in your spiritual awakening in this moment, like, what is that to you? Like, and I don't mean this in a flippant way, but like, does God appear for you? Like, what happens in that moment? Is it a higher power or is it a view with yourself? What happens?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. So I've never been religious. Got nothing against religion. I just didn't really I think I was baptized actually when I was younger, but I never went to church. My parents aren't religious. Dad is, I think. But that's cool, you know, got nothing against it. That just wasn't me. I've always been spiritual though. I've always been moved by the depth of the ocean, by the expanse of the stars. I love stargazing. I've always just been moved by things that create a sense of awe inside of me. So I always knew there was something bigger than myself. And when you get into recovery, there's these 12-step groups that I'm a part of, and they encourage you to connect with a power greater than yourself. And this doesn't have to be a religious God. It can be anything bigger than yourself. It could be the sun. It could be a person you really admire, preferably maybe not another person, but you know, it could be the ocean, it could be the stars, it could be just the collective power of a group. For example, like the power I have wouldn't be as great as the power you and me have coming together. You know, it's a collective mind. And if there was another person thrown in this room, then we're capable of so much more.
Yeah.
And just kind of going off on a tangent, but that's why all this stuff interests me. Like the power of our minds is incredible, and the power of having these conversations to just use our minds in a way that's going to benefit ourselves and others. And this is stuff I could never do when I was using drugs. And that's why this is stuff that interests me so much today, because I can't use drugs anymore. And sometimes it not sucks, but I feel like I'm missing out a bit. If there's like an important event, everyone's drinking, I can't drink alcohol, but I get access to all this other stuff in life, which I'm just completely all in for, like I love having these conversations. Back to the spiritual part though. So they encourage you in recovery programs to be a part of a power greater than yourself or connect with it. And like I mentioned, that can be anything. For me, it was the stars initially. It's changed over a period of the time. Now it's the universe. It's the state of being. It's consciousness. It's that thing that they've written thousands of books about, that in Eastern culture that's, really normal to talk about. But in Western culture, it can still be a bit unusual.
Yeah.
But in my time in recovery, it's interesting. I've become open to other religions. I wouldn't say I'm religious, but I like having an open mind and at least hearing people out, at least maybe reading a bit of the Bible or reading up a bit about some other religion, just to sort of hear what they're saying and take what I need from it.
Mm.
So I've become open in the process of recovery, like really open. Not all the time, I'm only human. There's sometimes I might get a bit tunnel visioned and this is the best way. This is the way things have to work. For example, in the work I do, I know that complete abstinence works for me. Having a beer a weekend wouldn't work. I needed to go completely off the drugs so I could connect with my spirit and so I could build confidence. Some people legitimately might be able to have a beer a weekend but that's not for me to say. So that's about keeping an open mind, staying opened. Could be a bit of a challenge sometimes, but I feel like naturally I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I personally prescribe, I think, to the all or nothing mentality. If it's got to go one way, hey, like it's much more difficult to try and balance something than not do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to, like, I feel like you have to constantly engage and initiate willpower where it's like not necessary, or you just shouldn't have to.
Yeah. This kind of comes back to what you were saying before about focusing on one thing. And I've noticed, like, this is something that's come up for me recently. Like, I've got a few things in my life today that I really love doing, which don't involve using drugs. From almost finished my yoga teacher training.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome.
Teacher. Yeah, I love it. I can talk more about that too, but I'm doing the counseling. I'm working at an alcohol and drug walking clinic. I'm part of recovery groups. I work at a detox. I'm into my ultra running, obviously. So there's all these different things which I've got to kind of allocate time and energy to. But I notice, like, if I go through a period where I'm running more, I just get like obsessed with it and I love it. I'm thinking about it, what shoes, what I could run tomorrow, like this and that. But same goes for anything else. If I'm just going all in on study, I look forward to the process. It's like that idea of it's easier to go to the gym 3 times a week than once a fortnight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the more energy I'm putting into something and more focus, the more enjoyable it is. And I think the more benefits I can get.
For sure.
In terms of learning and growing in that area.
So when it comes to the 12-step process, if you can highlight to some degree, what are the phases that a person ideally goes through on their journey of recovery? Like how, because you would be speaking to people who are one day in, right?
Yeah.
And watching that whole process.
Mm-hmm.
How do you take someone and guide them through that process? Like, what are the pivotal checkpoints that a person really has to kind of break through in order to be moving in the right direction?
Yeah, another great question. I think recovery can look different to each person. Like, I do 12-step meetings, not everyone does. I love this definition of recovery. It's increasing our health and wellness and striving to reach our full potential. So I think as long as we have those components, we're getting healthier, we're getting more well, we're open to learning and growing, and we acknowledge that we can do a lot more than what we're doing right now. We can achieve more. And that's why I'm so big on ultra running too. It's like this metaphor for life. We can do so much more than we think we can, and like our identities are not fixed. Like the person we are today, that is not the person we have to be 5 years from now. We can continually reinvent ourselves. And for me, that's a really inspirational message, even for me to hear. I remember one of the yoga teachers said that to me the other week to some girl who was doubting herself. She's like, who you are right now is not fixed. Like, like, even though this might seem hard and like it's going to take a while to get, like you're capable of so much more. In terms of the recovery journey and guiding someone through that, I always respect their autonomy, which means their right to make their own decisions and how they want to do it. But at the same time, it's a bit of a balancing act. Like people I work with, I will sort of share what's worked for me as well. And if they're sort of, like if 12-step meetings have worked for them in the past, then I'm going to kind of push them a bit more to, maybe have another crack at it. I think a lot of people, I won't speak too much into how other people feel about 12-step meetings because I want to respect the groups themselves, but I can speak about my experience in it.
Of course.
Broadly. So there's a 12-step program. There's 12 individual steps, obviously. The first step is about admitting that we were powerless and our lives have become unmanageable, which is, for me, it's surrender. It's waving the white flag and going, I'm done, I'm out, I need help. This isn't working anymore. Russell Brand has a book and he says step 1 is I'm fucked. You got it? Nice. It's a good book, man. I actually had my, again, sounds funny saying it, but I believe my first spiritual awakening reading a few pages from that book years before I got clean. I had this day where I read a bit of his book and my mind just went completely blank and I just felt at bliss all day. And I thought, what the hell is going on? The only explanation I have about that now would be I tapped into my spirit, which alleviated my psychological suffering.
Yeah, his own rendition of each step is definitely because I'd not heard of them before, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know. I just didn't know. I didn't know what to expect out of these 12 steps, but they definitely weren't what I was expecting in a lot of ways. I definitely wasn't expecting to hear the word God be used in them at all, and it takes such a spiritual leaning in that sense. I was not expecting that at all. I thought it was going to be a lot more technical, I guess, in a sense, like do this for 2 weeks and then once you've done this for 2 weeks,
like
then
a 16-week training plan or something.
Basically, yeah, like boot camp sort of thing, as opposed to, it seemed to me as I was reading through it that there were kind of stages of realization.
Yeah, you've got to tap into your spirit is essentially what it's saying. And this word God can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I know for me, the word God automatically growing up meant a religious God. But the important thing in 12-step is God can be whatever you want it to be. It's just a like blank space. Fill the word. I say God because it's easier to say than higher power.
Yeah.
There's less syllables. And it took me a few months to I was always okay with the word God, but it just felt a bit funny.
Yeah.
But now I'm completely cool with it. To me, it simply means a power greater than myself, means the universe, means different things to different people. But there's no pressure to have a religious God. But so when you read the steps and it's like God made us, like God wants us to do this and God, and it's kind of like, hang on. Like I remember reading the steps in rehab thinking, what the hell?
Yeah.
But I'll give it a crack because I was desperate. I was willing to do anything.
Yeah.
I think that's such a key aspect as well. People have to be ready to get well and they have to be ready.
That's a massive thing, isn't it? Like you were mentioning earlier, there's still a part of you that's holding on. That doesn't want to get well, and doesn't want to make the change. It's pretty hard to break through that.
And anyone that pushed that, like if you said to me, stop using drugs, which a lot of people that love me did, I'd get defensive.
Yeah,
because I was still conflicted, I was still wounded. I'd push people away, hence the isolation. Most people end up alone.
So you get to that breaking point on your own where it's like, fuck it. Step one is here. Yeah. Essentially, like I realized that I can't do anything about this alone.
By the time I got to rehab, I was a few days in, something clicked. Like I mentioned, I was listening to people. I really connected with my counselor. I really owe my life to that man. He was also someone with lived experience who had been addicted to drugs. And he just looked me in the eye, and he got me to tell my story. And he said, you're not a bad person, Jesse. You're just sick. And he's like, I can see you're trying. And if you put in 100%, I'll put in 110%. And so I did. I put in 100%, which meant I put in 110%. I never tried so hard at anything in my life before. The first time I legitimately tried my best, besides those years ago when I tried my best to stop using. But it'd been a long time since I tried my best, right? So in rehab, I'm writing out all the steps in my spare time. I'm attending all the meetings. They have these suggested things in recovery groups. They tell you to do regular meetings. They tell you to stay connected. They tell you to read the literature. So I'm reading books in rehab in my spare time. And we didn't have a lot of time to lay back and chill out. But I was so disciplined. And what happened was I started to build confidence through that discipline. And I started to build this belief in myself that I can do this. And it sounds strange, but through that spiritual awakening I had in that first week or so, I knew that I was going to get well. I knew that this is going to work if I hold on to this. It's like this warm, loving embrace grabbed me inside and said, I've got you. But you can't do things your way anymore. You've got to come with me.
Whoa. So you knew?
I knew. And that might sound a bit like overconfident or overzealous or something, but it wasn't a knowing like, Jesse, I've got this. It was like my spirit woke up and said, you know, I've got you if you follow me. And it was like something I was familiar with too, you know, like I'd been trying to connect with this thing. I'd heard whispers from this thing throughout my using. Like at the end of benders, I'd get that voice in my head saying, man, like this isn't what you're meant to be doing. You need to be somewhere else. Like there's more to life than you. I'd write notes on my phone, like I'm going to stop using here. I'm going to stop doing this there. Like I was really trying to get well for a long time. So by the time I got to rehab and I got in a safe place where I connected with my counselor, connected with other peers, that spring-loaded thing I was talking about before, it's like the hatch was let off and I just shot off, you know. I'm like, fuck yes. Like I've wanted this for so long and I convinced myself I was happy using drugs, but I was just so scared of letting go and I hated what drugs were doing to me, and that clarity came back. It wasn't an easy journey. Like I spent some of the hardest weeks of my life in that rehab. Physically, I found myself really sick.
How long were you in there?
35 days.
35 days.
A really intensive program. So we're talking I was up at 6, class by 9. Fit last classes at 7 o'clock. Not so much classes, like groups, therapy groups.
So they're keeping you busy.
Yeah, flat out. Like you're not there to kick your feet up and watch TV. There's only TV one night a week. No phones. You're there to do the work, which is connecting with yourself, which is what you've been running away from your whole life. Well, for me, it was.
So within those 35 days there, I can, what's the right way to say this? When it comes to going through probably massive realizations, probably like every single day or like every single minute potentially in an environment like that, where that's your entire focus, you're probably having light bulb moments.
Yeah, it was like light bulb exhaustion almost.
Yeah, just
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I was journaling every day too, because I encourage you to journal, and every day it's like, holy shit.
It's like you're breaking through like every breakthrough you're probably meant to have in the 10 years previous you were having fucking in 35 days.
Yeah.
I can imagine there's the positive side, but was that hard? Like were you having breakdowns through that, like emotional breakdowns?
Full on breakdowns.
Yeah.
Man. Like sleep was always messed up, waking up in like, I think I was sweating quite a lot. Can't remember actually, but my dreams were like full on vivid, traumatic dreams from like when I was getting chased by police to getting attacked to getting bullied. All this heartbreaks coming up from the past. I remember there was this really bad breakup. It wasn't even a breakup. I was seeing this beautiful German girl for about a month, right? It was like, for me, it was an awesome thing because I felt so lonely at that period of my life. And anyway, we caught up every day for a month, went to this music festival together. And then she had her own stuff going on too, but she ignored me the whole music festival. And I felt so abandoned. I'm like, why are you ignoring me? And she pretty much accepted that she doesn't want anything to do with me anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of like quite, again, not speaking, she probably won't listen to this, but not speaking badly of her. I think she was just had issues of her own, right? Where for something triggered in her and she needed to put her walls up. But I felt so rejected and I cried and cried and cried when the festival closed down on this hill in the rain, just curled up in a ball. It was such a sad moment because it wasn't just her. It was like all the people that had left me. It wasn't about them. It was just this sadness I carried with me from a little boy. And it came to the surface, but then I sucked it up and was absolutely miserable. Drove home from that festival with a friend, broke financially, emotionally, spiritually. Anyway, that came back in rehab. I spent a day, like one day I was smoking a cigarette outside and just feeling that emotion. It came up in a group and I'm like, holy shit, I'm back on that hill in the rain. And I'm like on my knees and I'm like howling, like a sickening howl. Sounded like I was like regurgitating. And what was happening was I was like unlocking these parts of myself which had been pushed so deep down in my stomach. And in the process, it actually made me physically sick. So I felt like I was vomiting, hence I was going like, I won't go into it now, but it was pretty gross. And going to the toilet was not good either. Like my whole digestion.
Just like purging.
Full on purging, man. Really full on. I didn't sleep well for 2 weeks in there. I was sleeping like 2-3 hours a night. And the doctors said, what you're experiencing is an emotional release. Like there's actually nothing wrong with you. And I felt so ill. Like whenever I ate food, I felt like vomiting. But sure enough, all this stuff came up and I just kind of vomited it out.
that process I am incredibly interested in. I don't know the answer. I don't know if there is an answer out there. Maybe you can tell me, or we'll find out at some point. When it comes to emotional release like that, I've experienced emotional release like that. And I know that there's a general phrase that gets thrown out, which is, when trauma gets stored in the body, emotion gets stored in the body, and whether that's energy that's just been blocked or stopped moving. But when they talk about energy, it's like, what is energy? Like, what is being blocked? Like, do you know through your work that you've done since this, do you know what the fuck is actually happening with emotional purging like that? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, to be honest. Like, I couldn't go into the whole science of it, but my best understanding is when we hold trauma in our bodies, we push it down to protect ourselves, and things keep coming in, we keep pushing them down. And we can push them down through using drugs and alcohol, through addictive behaviors, through doing a geographical, moving overseas, trying to forget about things instead of facing them head on.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where all these things are just pushed down, and it's not until we give them a chance to come back up that they will. And for me, that was done in the form of therapy and abstinence. So once I stopped using drugs and talking about my life, things just kept coming up. In rehab I went to, they encourage you to write out your whole life story, which I love the process. Like, I think for me, even though it was really uncomfortable, it was beautiful. Like, I recognized, although this is hard, and although that I feel so physically and sick and mentally overwhelmed and sad of what I've done to myself and where I am in my life, this is beautiful because I know this needs to happen. And there was like this part of me that was like, yes, like you're finally listening to me. It was like that authentic part that little boy could come back up, and that was all in the process of the purging. I was so relieved when I stopped feeling sick. I think after 2 weeks, stopped feeling sick, quit the cigarettes, started running, told everyone my life story, told them about the porn. There's a lot more to that sort of, you can call it sex addiction, but it's not like I was going around sleeping with heaps of women. It was more inward shame, around how I felt. But that was a big part of my journey. But I got up and I spoke to a room full of 30 people I'd only known a couple of weeks, and I didn't hold back. Like, I told them essentially everything. And what that did was, and like, I don't know if you're familiar with David Goggins, but he's really big on this. Once you tell the world your story, and it doesn't need to be the whole world, it can be one person, 30 people, a room. Once you own it and say, this is where I'm at, and that was the whole point of me doing this exercise, but that's not who I want to be anymore. And these are all the things that I'm feeling as a result of what I've been through, but this is where I want to go. And it's not so much about saying I'm sorry. It's just about honestly connecting with that step one, with like, this is too much. Like, I'm fucked. My life's unmanageable. I'm powerlessness. That's what I had to read out at the end of my life story in front of everyone. And I meant it, like I spent a lot of time working on my life story in there because I knew it was special. I knew that if I could be honest with this, it's going to help kickstart the healing journey. And I just wept and wept through other people's life stories, through my own. I was just crying so much. And it was so nice to connect with that sadness and be vulnerable. And you know what? I had a few people make some jokes about masturbation and porn and get a bit weirded out. But most people in that room just came up and hugged me and loved me and said, you're okay. And this guy in particular, I remember I was really afraid of in rehab. He came up to me and he said, that's the most courage I've ever heard from any man in my life. He's like, you should be really proud that you had the balls to say that,
Yeah.
And like, that's where the spiritual awakening kind of went into overdrive, and I just felt like I was levitating around. not literally, but like figuratively speaking.
Yeah. Empowered,
man. Confident. I just quit smoking. I just finally quit drugs. Started planning, what am I going to do when I get out of here? Created this rigid, disciplined schedule. I'd always been inspired by the likes of David Goggins, Cam Haines, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson. I knew these ideas of discipline, hard work, carrying a heavy load, consistency, they were all like sexy, appealing ideas to me. I just couldn't do them because drugs had me trapped, you know. I think that's why I love these podcasts too, because I know for me, when I was in the grips of active addiction, I wasn't having any inspirational conversations with my drug dealers, you know. I could tune into these other guys and here's some cool shit that eventually and ultimately would lead me into running ultra marathons and lead me into being disciplined and lead me into this journey, which I feel so fresh on. But I'm just so grateful I've got the freedom to embrace life now and to do the things that make me a better person each day.
Fucking oath, man. And you're giving me like a visceral feeling of that moment of just how suddenly hope is on the horizon. Hey, like life is a possibility.
Yeah.
Where it probably wasn't like 2 days before that.
Yeah.
Like I guess a lot of people go through times where it's like as far you can see like 4 hours ahead.
Yeah.
That's like as far as you can plan for your life. Because it's just like you're living in fucking survival mode.
Yeah, man.
Just trying to get through the day. And then, I'm a massive believer of and I won't rant on it too much because I do. It's just that the honest assessment, you know, somehow.
Self,
just getting to that point of just acknowledging like what you are.
Yeah.
So you can be like, cool, I've finally admitted it. I've I've been hiding for however long. I've been hiding from my true nature. I haven't wanted to admit that what I really am at this point in time, which is worse than what I want to be, basically.
Yeah.
And then just being able to be honest with it, even to yourself, write it down like you said, but then be able to tell someone. So at least there's one person that you don't have to hide from.
Yeah.
You know, like the facade can drop.
Yeah,
you know?
It's the only way forward. And I don't push people when they're not ready in treatment, you know, the one-on-one sessions I have from the group therapy. But I know in my experience, if there's unaddressed trauma, if there's things in your life that you're running away from, you're never going to be free. And I know that, and like I know because I lived it, like it's hard to, it's not really a matter of building the confidence to then finally be honest. I think for me, it was reaching a point where I had no way out. I went to rehab and then spiritually I was ready. I had the support around me I needed and they kind of said the floor is yours. Like this is your moment, you know, you can be honest and it's not easy, but it is so liberating because you know what? No one really cared as much as I did. So what? Like I watched a bit of porn in my car, got off on the weekends. Like, it was a pretty socially isolating thing to do and probably not socially acceptable. But at the end of the day, like it's no big deal unless I wanted to make it a big deal. Yeah. You know, like.
You're right. Like you're the one living it in the end. Like you're the only one who can't switch off from that existence where everyone else, you're right, wouldn't care as much. Yeah. Yeah. We're always our biggest critic in a lot of ways on the inside. I wanted to ask you if you know the answers to this. Another thing that's perplexed me is the art of letting go. Whether it's trauma, the memories of a shitty fucking experience, the memories of how you've acted, or how I've acted, the things that we wish we didn't say, or the actions we wish we didn't do, or the things we wish we did do. Either way, memory and how that sits in our body and actually letting go. I know you spoke about the purging of that kind of being just a process that happened to you. Is there any information within your circles or the steps that you follow that has some method of how to let go? Because it's something that I, for a long time when I was struggling with things, I had that on my mind of like, how the fuck do you let go? How do you move on? You know? And I found my own ways, but it might be different for everyone, but I would love to hear your take on it. Yeah.
I'd love to talk about it. It's a beautiful concept. It's not something where I was just able to do suddenly. I'll speak about the 12 steps because that's exactly what the 12 steps do. When I explain it to people who don't know what it is, I say it's a process of introspection. So looking at yourself and your motives, an honest assessment of where you're at. That's step one. Then the whole thing's really about letting go and giving back and continuing to do that on a daily basis. And for me, this whole letting go and through, I guess, the work I've done on myself, it comes from the foundation that everyone's just trying to do their best. No one's out to get me like I used to believe they were. People aren't trying to hurt me. The world's a good place. I fundamentally believe that now. Yes, bad things happen, but I choose to focus on the good and control what I can control. There's a beautiful concept in recovery. It's this idea of just controlling what we can and letting go of the things we can't. The serenity prayer is quite common. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And lots of people in recovery will do that prayer daily. And yeah, it's about kind of softening up and realizing like life's in my favor. Like life can be beautiful if I trust, the good and the bad. And I've had good things happen to me, great successes. I've lost best friends in recovery, one recently about a year ago. Like things happen, but as sad and difficult as they are, that trust I have is unwavering. And it's a beautiful thing. I can enjoy the good and the bad. Now I can let go and do all these things. Don't get them perfect, but I've got the foundation there because I believe that, the world, like no one's out to get me. Everyone's doing their best. If people are hurting people, they're hurt. Hurt people hurt people. And I think that's helped me let go, like all the people that hurt me in the past, I know they were just doing their best and they didn't mean it. And I forgive them because I forgive myself. That's something they preach in early recovery. You have to learn to forgive yourself, which can be a process.
Yeah.
But once we do, we can forgive others. Because at the end of the day, and I think about this quite often, kind of a sobering thought, but when I'm on my deathbed, how do I want to look back? And, what do I want to smile about? What are things I want to remember? I just want to remember, we're all just on this journey. No one knows why we're here. We're just doing the best we can. It's a beautiful thing, and that's the spiritual path for me as well. It's all intertwined. In relation to the steps, you've got the step 1, that admitting my life's powerless. Step 2 is we came to believe that something could help. That's when that higher power comes into it. Step 3 is making the decision, all right, I'm going to turn my life over to this, which might seem quite drastic and radical. Well, it is. I remember hearing that phrase in rehab, I got to turn my will over. I'm like, well, what's a will? I didn't even know what a will was, man. My vocabulary and my cognitive function were completely cooked when I was in rehab. I had to Google what will was and this idea of surrender, and it was all alien to me. But anyway, step 3, we turn our will over. We make a decision that, something else could help me, and now I'm going to let it. And that could look like a number of different things, but it could look like going to a meeting when you don't want to. It could look like just showing up to somewhere even though you don't want to. It could look like just not using drugs. It's like having faith that even though I don't know what it's going to be, something is going to work out.
Okay.
Yeah. Step 4 is the inventory. So we look at ourselves. That's when we take stock of who we are, where we've been, our fears, our resentments, any sexual ideals, which means any sexual relationships we've had we're not proud of. For me, there were quite a few of those. And then we release them all. We speak about it with someone in step 5, or we became ready to. And in steps 6 and 7, we started to look at other behaviors and things that aren't serving us and come to realize we're not perfect. We're only human, but accept our flaws and pray to this higher power that, to help us be more human and be more forgiving and kind to ourselves. And then steps 8 to 9, we start to look at other people, and that's when the amends come into it. We write a list of people we've hurt, and we make apologies, not just apologies, but sincere acknowledgements that what we did impacted their life. And it's not about looking good or saying, hey, look at me now, I'm doing better. For me, it was about the way I did it, I called some people in my life I hadn't spoke to for a long time and said, hey, I just want to acknowledge what I did, that it could have made you feel X, Y, and Z. And I never really acknowledged that because I was just thinking about me and I'm really sorry. And the important part about the making amends and apologies is we only do it if it's not going to harm the other person. So we don't do it out of our own benefit. If this person said they don't want to speak to us ever again, we respect that.
That's a good point.
And we do a living amends. So, for example, I'm not going to go around and apologize to prostitutes I've slept with in the past, But now I'm just not going to see prostitutes. You
Yeah.
know, I'm going to do my best and not watch porn as much as I can. I'm going to do my best to clean up my act, treat women with respect, treat myself with respect. And, you know, like it's a living amends. So we can't always go back and speak to the individual. Sometimes they're deceased.
Yeah.
Other times they've moved overseas. Other times it's not appropriate. So
That's a really good point.
yeah, man, it's a beautiful program, right? So like, I didn't make this up. No, it's something that was given to me freely, you know, and I freely give back. And step 10 is we continue to do this. So we just take inventory of our day. We take time to reflect on what's gone well, what hasn't. Have I been honest? Have I been resentful? Have I been selfish? It's not a matter of beating ourselves up. It's just a matter of looking at where we can improve and realizing that today's shower won't keep me clean tomorrow. You know, I've got to constantly wake up and do it again and again. And that includes staying off drugs, keeping grounded, reminding myself I'm just one drug away from my life blowing up again. And I know I would. Reality is if I use drugs now, I just wouldn't be able to stop. Maybe not then and there, but over the course of 6 months, a year, my life would blow up again. So it keeps me grounded. That's step 10. 11 and 12 is my favorite part. We seek through prayer and meditation to increase our contact with this higher power. And I was all about that. I was loving getting into that. I'm like, what's going to happen? Because step 12, like, promises a spiritual awakening, right?
Yeah.
But I was going to like ascend to the heavens. But
Yeah.
no, just kidding. But step 12 is when we give back. And our spiritual awakening is we've started the work on ourselves. We've done a lot of healing. We've let go of a lot of baggage. And now our life is no longer about us anymore. Of course, it always has to be to a degree. But now life is also about helping others and realizing life's not all about me. There's other people on my journey. My journey is unique, but I'm not the only one who has been through addiction. So it's about helping others and, you know, being of service. And these 12 steps aren't new either. This is stuff you'd read in all sorts of spiritual, religious text for since humans ever existed. These are just things that I believe keep people to live, maybe not keep, but help us live a meaningful life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the fundamental process of transformation, isn't it? They're fucking good, man.
Yeah.
They're really, really good. Who wouldn't benefit from a 12-step process on top of whatever fucking shit you're going through?
100%. And I know a lot of people that, not personally, but a lot of sort of well-known, famous people have done the 12 steps with no history of addiction.
Yeah.
And they speak quite highly of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said earlier, to me, it really just, it sounds like a spiritual process. If you read that out to somebody and they had no idea it was connected with alcohol or narcotics or whatever it is, I don't think they would automatically connect it to it. They would just think it's some sort of religious or personal development passage from somewhere. What do you do for your meditation or your meditation practices? I would love to hear how you go about that.
Sure. So do a bit of yoga. I've done yoga the last few years.
How did you get into that? What was the decision to do that?
I actually enjoyed yoga before I got clean, but I'd often go down really stoned, talking about weed, but I'd fall asleep during the yoga class. You know, my intentions are in the right place, but not that there's anything wrong with that, but ideally, if I'm sober, I get more from it.
Yeah.
Today, look, I do a few different kinds of meditation. I enjoy just body and breath awareness, which is simply taking a few deep breaths and then allowing my breath to just be organic, be as it is, allowing myself to just instantly do nothing, like just let go of trying to do anything. I think a lot of people have this idea of meditation. We're trying to be calm. We're trying to be peaceful. We're trying to like get real zen. It's like, no, just do nothing. Like, I won't do it right now, but if I just completely stopped right now and closed my eyes, what's actually going on in this moment if I just did nothing? Because when we do nothing, we allow ourselves to be receptive. So for me, meditation's like being receptive, being like an antenna. And the first thing people notice is when they try to do nothing, you have this crazy mental dialogue which starts saying things like, oh, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that, how long am I going to sit here for? When's this meditation going to be over? This is uncomfortable. And that's the mental dialogue which eventually we can also become aware of through meditation. Just like I'm aware that I have a head in space right now, my feet are on the ground, or that you're sitting about a meter or so away from me, I can also be aware that I'm having thoughts. So thoughts themselves eventually become an object of awareness. I've done lots of meditation through the Sam Harris meditation app.
Waking up.
Waking up.
I fucking love that
That's
app.
a really good one.
Yeah.
He talks. That was probably him, a bit of him talking there of what I've learned. All this stuff I'm talking about, I've learned. It's not. I haven't created it.
I think he was the first. He really got me into, what's the right way to say this? Listening to the way that he talked about spirituality and the way that he guided the meditations, I really connected with initially because I was so skeptical, with a lot of things. And he has a way of kind of just the way that you just explained it, a very seemingly rational approach towards meditation and spirituality. So if you're someone who's not inclined for any sort of faith-related spirituality, God-esque things, it's kind of like a scientific approach to meditation in a lot of ways. It's a good way to just logically get stuck into it.
Yeah, it's a great approach, which I share with most people I meet now.
Yeah.
Especially the people I work with in detox.
Yeah.
I think if anyone's listening, you can get a free scholarship, I think, for a discount on the price if you Google it, Sam Harris Scholarship.
I think he gives out like year memberships and stuff to people if you email him, and you like, if anyone's out there who actually wants to get this app or just wants to get started in it, I've heard him say that if you send him an email and just go like, hey, look, explain a bit of your story and be like, I can't afford the $20 a month or whatever it is, he'll give it out for free for a year or 6 months or something like that.
So generous.
So you do that form of meditation. They just don't try and do anything.
Just do nothing. I do the guided meditation, listening to lots of Sam Harris.
Yeah.
I've done lots of different guided meditations throughout my recovery journey. But the one with Sam Harris, I definitely resonate with the most.
Yeah.
I think exactly you explained it so well. It's just really easy to follow. He explains an emphasis on why we meditate. He really makes it attractive. He talks about that meditation will improve every aspect of our life, from the way we eat, drink, go to the toilet, watching a movie, having sex, going to the shops, the relationships we have, our ability to respond rather than react. That's a big one, which I'd like to come back to as well, because that's something that's really important in recovery, creating that space. In terms of other meditation I do, I went to a Vipassana retreat a couple years ago. Have you heard about those?
Yeah. I want to do one, but haven't prioritized it or made the time.
Yeah, cool. I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's supposed to be, and so fulfilling and rewarding.
How long did you go for?
10 days is a minimum requirement if you haven't been to one before. And they're long days.
Did you do that in Melbourne?
Yeah, I did.
Really?
Out in Hillsville. They've got one.
I'll have to get the details of it from you.
Yeah. Incredible experience. Just to sort of take 10 days to do nothing.
Like, that's a scary process. I think if you asked a lot of people, that would scare the shit out of them. That scares the shit out of me, to be honest, man. Like the thought of, and it's something that I actually want to do. And that scares me.
For that reason? Like, why do you want to do it? What do you think you'd get from it?
I believe that I believe that we live a spiritual life first and foremost. I think that the spiritual existence that I have and I experience is the most fundamental part of my existence, and then everything else is on top of that. And the things that I get out of meditation and other spiritual practices benefit me more than anything else. And so I would like to take the next step, and it's one of those things, man, where I just haven't, but I would like to take the step and do something longer, because I guess I'm a believer in a lot of ways that there's a lot more under the surface, even if I haven't seen it. So I guess this is a faith-based thing for me. But from what I've felt and what I've seen and experienced in my brief forays under the surface with meditation, I believe that it goes so much deeper, and I'm really interested to know what the fuck that's all about.
Yeah, man. I love that. And I was quite similar.
Yeah.
So, I'd highly recommend it.
Because you're silent for 10 days, right?
Yeah, no talking, no looking at people.
Yeah.
Just you and the space you're in. You eat food. You can walk around the garden for short periods during the day. You can rest in your bed.
What were the biggest can you recall what the biggest sort of takeaways or experiences you felt throughout that time?
So on the last day, you can finally talk again. They call it meta day, which is unconditional, like love and kindness. That's when you're meant to sort of channel all that energy you built up over 10 days and share it with each other. And I had the most incredible experience on that last day when you walk out of the meditation room and it's kind of like, are we allowed to talk now? And then like I heard some people giggling walking down the steps, and I walked down the steps and I saw this guy, I think his name was Aaron. I kind of walk up to him, waiting for him to talk first. And I was like, how'd you go? And he just starts laughing. He's like, holy shit. He's like, it's like, are we allowed to talk? And I'm like, I think so. And just the sheer connection I had through doing what we're doing now, looking at in someone's eyes, it made me realize how much more there is, how stimulating it is just from having a conversation with someone. And I wasn't able to notice any of that because I was so distracted. So the biggest takeaway I got was once I quietened down, I noticed a lot more. Like there's actually always a lot going on. And this speaks from day-to-day meditation. Like I like to be curious and close my eyes sometimes and be like, what would I notice if I just close my eyes for 10 minutes right now? What am I noticing that I'd definitely miss, or most likely miss, depending on how much you meditate, if I wasn't meditating? So I think just increased awareness of how beautiful and intricate and interesting life is. I had this other hilarious moment, this story where you're not allowed to speak or look at anyone, like I mentioned. So it's pretty like somber at times, man. You get like pretty in your own head. It's rough, but I definitely recommend it.
Guess that's the point, right?
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. I'm sitting in this room next to this Indian man. I got to know him pretty well. I never could look at his face, but I got to see what he ate on a day-to-day basis at what times. You get used to other people's schedules because there's nothing else to notice.
Yeah.
And he's got toast in the toaster. I didn't know there was toast in the toaster. And all of a sudden, the noise of, it's just me and him in the room, right? The noise of the toaster goes off and the toast flies out of the top, lands on the top of the toaster, falls onto the table, and then falls onto the ground. And because it was just me and him, like we both look over and just hysterics. We just could not stop laughing. I had to leave the room because I was about to have like a fit. And it just goes to show, like, I don't know if anyone's read, sure people have read it, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Okay, yeah. I haven't read it.
Concentration camps in occupied Nazi Europe. And he talks about the book where people will search for humor and light in the darkness, like where our minds will, we're wired to seek positive things when we're really suffering. And that's how I felt in that room. Bit different. I don't want to compare it to a concentration camp, obviously. What they went through was absolutely horrific. But it was funny, man. The toast fell on the ground. And it's just me and him. I'm looking at him. I'm like... And like we just laughed so much because we'd been quite, somber. We hadn't had a good laugh for a while.
Have you... What I really want to do is I want to do a darkness retreat.
What is that?
Have you heard of these?
Nah.
Oh, bro. A darkness retreat is... I can't believe you haven't heard of this. I can't believe I get to tell you about this.
Wicked.
A darkness retreat is... it's a place that these people have set up a room, essentially, and it's got everything you need in there, but it's fully dark. So like they deliver you food and everything every day. There's a toilet in there. There's everything you need in there. So you don't leave this room and you're in complete darkness. Not like a little bit, like complete fucking darkness I've heard people doing them different times. Some people do 4 days. Some people do 10 days. No connection with anyone. You're not talking and you're in fully dark. So like you can't read. You can't write. You can't do fucking nothing. You're just sitting there in darkness. And I've heard that what happens after maybe 2 days is it's like you're, I don't know the science behind this, but the the part of your brain that naturally produces DMT starts to like fire up, essentially. Do you know what DMT is?
Yeah. Familiar with it.
And it starts to essentially light everything up to a point where you're in the circus. You're in like a
holy shit.
You're in a completely bright kaleidoscopic world.
You're kidding.
You're not in darkness. You're not in darkness anymore. Like everything is completely lit up, and then you spend days in this bright landscape whilst you're in it with yourself. Sounds fucking extreme, and I've seen I can't remember any of I think a guy named Aubrey Marcus, if you've heard of him, he made a video about it, and a few people have videoed themselves when they first come out, and they take the eye mask off and they're seeing light for the first time, and they're just having it's incredible.
Good time. That sounds.
It's a good time. I'm sure people have some fucking shit times as well. It's a crazy one at that, but seems like people get a lot out of it.
For sure. I'm just like so curious, like what would it be like hitting day 2 and the kaleidoscope show starts?
I have no idea. I think, I don't know where. I need to do more research. Like I believe that they do run them in Australia in some places, and I would fucking love to do it.
For sure.
I would love to do it. We'll have to.
Sounds wicked.
We'll have to look into it.
Yeah, man. And like, I'm just thinking about like trying to go to the toilet and eat food in complete darkness.
Yeah, I've no idea. It would be hard.
Yeah.
It must be really disorientating and also scary, like you got nothing to rely on. But I think you start to get a lay of the land pretty quickly. Have you done much work with breath work?
I have.
You have?
So through the yoga course I did, they taught us a few different breathwork techniques. I met this legend, Rich, at the yoga retreat, and he swears by breathwork. He was doing it every morning at 5:30 a.m., said it was really helpful with some sort of family relationship issues he'd had recently, just to alleviate the stress. He'd been doing the Wim Hof breathing every morning.
Yeah.
Sort of like really in fast pace through the nose and out through the mouth, like doing that. And just doing that 30 times and pausing and repeating, and like sort of breath retention as well. So I've been doing that most mornings since the yoga retreat. Sort of comes and goes. There's been periods in my life where I haven't done it, but at the moment I've been doing quite a lot and finding it helpful, but I'd like to do more.
What do you feel like out of the practices that you do, what do you feel like you get out of it? Where do you feel like it benefits you?
I feel like it calms my nervous system.
Yeah.
That's probably the major benefit of why I do it.
Okay, awesome.
It's a good reset. I often wake up with still nightmares of using residue of the past.
Yeah.
And I find just getting into that breath work first thing in the morning, I can even do it rugged up in bed, just kind of resets my system. I think it's great to get fresh oxygen in the morning as well. If you think about it, when we're sleeping, we're lying sideways and all sorts of dust particles and crap are getting in our lungs, and often, we breathe quite shallow anyway. So just to get a few deep breaths in, I like that idea. Yeah.
Regulate the nervous system.
Yeah.
For sure, man. Throughout my life, I've done different forms of breathing, some connected with martial arts. Like there's a form of breathing called Misogi breathing, and there's like the Wim Hof breathing. And I've always been really interested in it just because it was something that was shown to me from a young age. But I don't know, I always kind of believed that there was something more there, but personally hadn't really found it. Some mood stabilizers, some things like this, but nothing I would say that's like fully enlightening that I've heard, like if you learn how to breathe in the right way, you can become enlightened essentially.
Yeah.
And it's something that I hadn't really found. And me and my girlfriend, we went to a breathwork day workshop. I can't remember their names now. Their breathwork series is called Awaken.
Cool.
I'm gonna have to.
Cool name.
I'm gonna have to remember who they are. They're awesome. And anyways, we did this breathwork retreat, and I kind of went into it pretty, not skeptical, but I'd seen a lot of videos from breathwork retreats and like people having complete breakdowns and things like that.
Sure.
And a part of me was just like, yeah, not fucking me. Like that's not going to happen to me. So I don't know. I felt a bit uncomfortable going into that sort of situation. Like, I don't know if I can be vulnerable in a room full of 100 people or whatever. And I'd never done this sort of breathing. The first half of the day was essentially lots of the stuff that we've been talking about, you know, intention setting, taking an assessment of where your life's at and how you want it to change, all that sort of stuff. And then we got into this breathing, and the technique was essentially not really controlled breathing, but not stopping at the top or the bottom. So just
Right.
essentially not really counting.
Yeah.
And just pushing that, but it's 45 minutes.
Right. So it's not like a strict form of breathing, but as long as you're not reaching those peaks and depths of your lung capacity.
Yeah, you're just not you're not retaining it at the top, and
Sure.
you're not holding it at the bottom once you've expelled all your air. You're
45 minutes.
Yeah.
A long time to, well, I was going to say long time to breathe,
Man.
but that makes no sense.
Man, this shit was fucking crazy. Like it's one of the craziest experiences I've ever had, and I've had some profound, massive, life-changing psychedelic experiences throughout my time, and this could definitely stand on its own as being one of the most intense things that I've ever experienced in terms of an emotional, like what you were talking about earlier, the emotional purge. And so I didn't really have too many intentions either. I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do the breathing and just give it my all.
Yeah.
And so I'm breathing. There's people are starting to freak out everywhere and go through their own,
Making funny noises. And,
yeah, people laughing, people are crying, people are fucking yelling. Like,
which is kind of wigging you out in itself, right?
yeah, for the first like 5-10 minutes, I'm like, yeah, I wasn't fully comfortable.
Yeah.
You know?
I've done a few like shorter breath works, and the guy behind me is like,
Yeah.
well, that's kind of weird, but I'll just go with it.
Each to their own, and they did a really good job of setting the scene of like telling you that that's what's going to happen, and to be aware of it essentially, and just like don't worry about it essentially.
Just go with it.
And like 10-15 minutes in, like my whole body started to get like electrified essentially, like tingling everywhere, like that oversaturation of oxygen. And supposedly it's the alkalinity in your blood raising or something.
Yeah, I've always wondered what it is.
Yeah,
because
so
I've experienced that a little bit, but I haven't done like a full 45 minutes.
So if you've got that feeling, it happens when you do the Wim Hof, and everything starts to tingle a little bit, you get a bit lightheaded.
Yeah, or the breathing before ice baths, like it's a similar thing.
Exactly, man. So it's that same feeling, but you just keep breathing and just lean into that feeling and keep pushing through it.
So good.
The breathing experience, it gets more and more and more and more intense, and that tingling experience starts happening everywhere. And there's this process that they warned us about. It's called like, it sounds like tinnitus, but it's not tinnitus like the ear ringing. It's like tinnitus or something like that.
Okay.
And it's where everything starts to like cramp up or something, and like you get like T-Rex arms, so everything started to cramp up.
I've actually felt that a little bit before.
Everything cramps up massively, like crazy. And so I'm lying there, you've got an eye mask on and a blanket on, and I'm breathing away, and I'm just like, this is nuts. I'm still rationally thinking like, this is crazy. Like, am I okay here? And I'm holding on for dear life, and I just feel like that everything's getting more and more and more charged, and just the emotion in me is just feeling more intense. It's unidentified emotion, but it just feels intense. And I'm getting more and more tight. And then they've got facilitators who walk around and do sort of different tapping techniques and things like that. And this facilitator, I didn't even open my eyes. So I think it was, I don't know who it was, but I know it was a woman. And she came up and just like started tapping on my chest where I was feeling like all this kind of like pain and everything, like in my throat. She started tapping, and then she just like grabbed my hands and like pulled them open a little bit and like held my head and was like, it's all good. Like let it go. She could clearly see that I was like struggling.
Yeah.
She's like, let it go. And then as soon as she said that, I completely broke down, fully started crying more than I've ever cried in my whole entire life. Like fucking full on hyperventilating. I kept going with the breathing, and just like had this emotional release, like you were saying, just from my whole body. Like I couldn't believe. And it's I just had to spend days and days afterwards trying to like sort through like what actually came up and like how that happened, because I was not expecting it at all. But in that moment, I was thinking like, holy fuck, like I wish I had a process like this when I was actually going through something really tough, you know, because there were so many times where I was holding on and didn't know how to let go. Just couldn't let go. Like you spend all your time when you're going through fucking shitty times holding on.
Yeah.
You know, you're trying to keep your shit together as opposed to let it go. And so having a breathwork experience like this to essentially engage the process of just emotionally letting go was fucking nuts.
Sounds unreal, man. Definitely something I'd be interested in doing. So
I'll find the names of these people and I'll send it through to you. It's one of the craziest things ever. I mean, you're sober in this, by the way. Like it's not enhanced in any way.
I feel like all these things, you know, what they have in common is like they're quite extreme. It's like curiosity is what makes me want to do these things.
Yeah.
And that's the same reason I use drugs, you know, curiosity. I like to venture off into other galaxies in my mind. I was big on psychedelics too, you know. I just like that idea of like a new experience. And I find like now I put the drugs down, I look for that in other things like ice baths, you know, going in the sauna, whether it's, you know, holotropic breathing, or I'd love to do a breathing session. I haven't yet, but, you know, just these things, like running, going on like big bike rides or hikes, just finding other ways to be curious and adventure. I love that stuff.
100%, man. There's a lot of cool things out there to be able to expand your mind. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And lots of them are free. Unless you go into an actual workshop, it's obviously not free, but a lot of this stuff you can just do without anything other than yourself.
Yeah, man. And this is a message I really try to share with the people I work with, you know, this idea of recovery being attractive. Like I think a lot of people who are still using drugs or going through treatment, trying to get sober and in a lot of pain, they fail to see that like this pain's not going to last forever. And it can be hard to see and even sometimes insensitive to preach this to them. So I'm careful when I do, but I'm really big on showing people like life can be so amazing and there's so much to do on the other side of sobriety, you know, and no longer do I get that instant gratification. So I got to work for things, but it's so satisfying, you know, like just feeling like a normal person. Got to be careful with that language. Sometimes people get offended saying like a normal person. You know? But they say that a lot at recovery meetings, you know. It's not that we're not normal. We just have a disease. And
well, there's normal for you as well.
Totally, yeah. Well, what's normal?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a good reminder.
What is normal? We're all pretty fucking strange in our own ways.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Absolutely.
And so all of this has brought you to actively helping others through the work that you do now. What is that situated like? Like you mentioned, you're working in recovery. What are the different forms that you help other people now?
So there's a few different forms. One is bridging support, which means I call someone on the phone who's waiting for treatment. They're nice to chat, but you feel they're some of the hardest calls as well, you know, because people are, you know, pretty unpredictable. They're waiting for treatment. It's a scary time. You never know what you're going to get, but we just do our best to check in and see how they're going. There's one-on-one sessions I do, which are face-to-face, which is like kind of like a counsellor, which I'm actually studying to become a counsellor down the track. I think I'd love to do that as someone with lived experience. At the moment, my job role is a peer worker in lived experience, which means I use my own lived experience to connect with people. My job's essentially, and I love saying this, it's to connect with people who have been incredibly disconnected for a long, long time, you know, disconnected from themselves, from other people, from their communities. So my job is like to get in there and try to connect with them, which I love, you know, through my own experience. Like I've been there too. There's this great sort of story I love about peer work, which is what I do. And the rough story is someone is walking down the street and they fall in this hole, and the hole is big and slippery and they can't get out, and they start to freak out and they start screaming out for help, like help me, I'm stuck in this hole and it's dark and I can't get out. And eventually someone walks past and he's a baker and he freaks out, you know, he's really empathetic for this person. He's like, oh my God, like that hole's huge and this person's injured themselves. It's like however many meters deep, you know, and baker's like, I'll go and grab you some food. And the baker comes back and throws some food down the hole and says, I'll go and try and find some help for you, but all I have now is food. The person eats the food, but it's still stuck in the hole. And then eventually, like, a doctor walks past and it says, please help me, I'm stuck in the hole. And the doctor says, here's a prescription. Here's how you fell in the hole. Here's what, like, you're diagnosed with. These are all metaphors, you know.
Yeah.
Here's your problem. Here's your help. There's medication. And the doctor walks off and the person's still stuck in the hole. Over the day, more and more people walk past, but eventually a peer worker walks past. And peer worker sees a person in the hole screaming out for help, and the peer worker jumps down the hole. And the person in the hole says, well, why would you do that? Now we're both stuck in here and we can't get out. And the peer worker says, it's okay, I've been down this hole before and I found a way back out. I love that because that's the essence of my work. I'm not pushing people to do things. I'm just walking alongside them and letting them know that I've been there too. So back to that capacity, like, of what I do, one-on-one sessions, there's group therapy sessions at a detox. I've started to run sort of workshops of discussions where we'll talk about anything from connection to discipline, do meditation groups, do my own guided meditation and breath work. And it's all new and exciting.
Incredible.
Because there's no agenda of what I have to do. They're like, we trust you to do whatever you want. And it's all pretty recent. I've only been working at the detox about 4 months, running groups for a couple months. I've been at this other job working at an alcohol and drug clinic for 9 months. But it's all very exciting.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So you can go in and you can run your own show essentially on the way that you want to assist people.
Yeah, I've got an hour throughout the day where we sit down and depending on what I feel like in that given day, what could be of use to the people in there, we'll sit down and we'll discuss a topic, kind of like, I guess, me and you are now. And I'll always explain, like, I've got my own experience, but I'm not the only expert here. We all are. This is a place where you can call me out if you want to. Like, I'm not necessarily right. I'm just sharing with you what's worked for me. So it's a really good learning environment where the power imbalance is not as unbalanced as usual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because most people in treatment feel like no one really understands or gets it.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a lot more powerful when it's coming from someone who's potentially gone through something very similar.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, fuck, maybe you do know.
Yeah.
Maybe you do understand.
Yeah, man. And I get like the nicest compliments at work sometimes. Some of the guys are like, you have so much wisdom. And it's like, oh, like, it's so nice to hear that, you know, because I don't always think of myself that way. Like, I've been on this journey, but I'm only a few years in. I'm still learning a lot.
Yeah.
I make mistakes all the time, but it's nice to have that impact on other people. So, yeah, it's really rewarding work, man. I'm all about those ideas of, reaching beyond our grasp, which is sort of what that run was about too, just kind of demonstrating that we can do so much more than what we think we're capable of. And these ideas of discipline and service and growing and learning, it's all like part of my recovery journey. And that's what keeps me driven at work to share with people. And yeah, I'm in a much better place than what I was in 4 years ago.
It's incredible, bro.
Thank you.
It's really incredible to be able to make such a dramatic change in such a big way and to come away with that with just by listening to you, so much understanding, like some like actual practical understanding of how to create change it's really, really impressive.
Thanks, mate. And like the thing is, like, when I was going through all these learning experiences, I never would have thought they're going to be of benefit to me. Like for my job description, it actually helps if you've been addicted to drugs. Like as a counsellor, the line of work I want to do, you either need a really good qualification to be competitive or lived experience. So it's like, how cool is that? There's not many jobs I can apply for where being addicted to drugs looks good.
Yeah, true.
So it's like this crazy experience of like for so long things didn't make sense. It's just pain and suffering. And now like I can use that to support others. And like a shift I've gone through the last year or two is, I think the first year of my recovery, it was all sort of about me and it needed to be, like I was just so excited and learning all these new things. And now I've kind of realized that, I'm not the only one that's gone through this journey, which I've mentioned a few times today. And now I'm kind of looking over there and looking over there, seeing what challenges other people have gone through. And I think it doesn't matter if you've been addicted to drugs or not. There's stuff people are going to hopefully get from what I've said today and can relate to in other aspects. Like there's so many challenges we face, but I think it's given me the ability, what I've gone through, to be authentic and show up as best I can in each moment with other people in my life and build some really cool relationships and have access to doing cool things. And that's why I love running as well. It's like the same metaphor. It's like when I'm running, I feel free. I feel like I'm able to go and do a hike over in the Alps if I wanted to, or I can go running and I don't know, like the Boston Marathon if I wanted to one day. Like there's all these cool things I've unlocked through running and recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, you're capable.
It's just the best. Yeah, and like connect with other people. Like when I was using, it was just my ability to connect with others was just completely shunned. So that's my favorite part, man. Just going for a run and people smiling, you know, strangers, and they don't know it, how much that means to me.
Yeah.
For so long I'd walk with my head down, you know.
Yeah, can't look at anyone.
Yeah.
Must feel pretty good to be able to connect with the world.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than connecting with people, hey?
Life's beautiful now, man.
Yeah.
Like, went out for dinner with some friends last night. Like, I mean it. Like, he's like, how good's life? He's also in recovery. It's like, yeah, it's up and down, but like, we're free. I think once you've been trapped for so long, you really appreciate what it means to be free.
That hits home for me, for sure. That hits home hard. So you've been a part of your run, you were donating to, what was the institute? Black Dog
Institute.
Yeah, Black Dog Institute. So you've been raising money for them. Before we wrap it up, I guess it'd be worth noting for other people, potentially people listening to this, if they're looking for help or they want to make some changes in this particular space, like what are the initial steps? Where does someone reach out to if they want to start their road to recovery? Where do they begin?
Yeah, so great question. There's a few options. I guess probably like there's 12-step groups, which are great to reach out to. Got NA and Alcoholics Anonymous. NA stands for Narcotics Anonymous.
Okay, yep.
Which for me, they're really helpful to be part of a community and to keep me accountable and just to keep me level-headed too, you know. Like even going out and running this 100-mile race last week, when I sit down in a meeting, I'm no better or worse than anyone else. You know, we're all there for a united purpose. So I get a lot from the meetings. People can always access the statewide services for mental health and AOD, which there are often, you know, significant waiting times, but they are free. So eventually you'll get in. I've definitely become an advocate for mental health and learned a lot in my work, my journey through my own mental health stuff and addiction. And I've learned that although there are these services, which is great, they're not perfect. We're so lucky to have them. But yeah, there's definitely gaps in the service. So for me, it's all about supporting people to access services. So if people are struggling, just put your hand up and say you need help. It'll be the most courageous thing you ever do. And if the person you're asking for help for can't help you, ask someone else. Eventually, you'll come across someone that will give you the time of day. For people with friends and family that are struggling, really just get around your loved ones and help them access treatment. Unfortunately, if people don't want to get sober, and I hate saying this, but the reality is you can't, if they're not ready, they're not ready. There's nothing you can do. The best thing you can do is actually not enable someone who's still using drugs and just say, you're on your own. But if you want help, I'm here for you. But if you want to use, I wish you all the best with that. And that's just like boundaries, you know. And in my experience, trying to save someone who's addicted to drugs never works. My mum had to do that for me, you know, just say, you're on your own. I don't think she meant it. It was kind of like a tactic to try and get me to seek treatment, but it worked, you know. I think I needed to realize like I'm responsible for myself. So you've got those statewide services people can access, 12-step groups. But ultimately, it comes down to community, I think, and starts off with just developing those friendships. So if people are feeling isolated and like they don't have the confidence to connect with a group of people, just find one person, you know, just a problem shared is a problem halved.
100%.
I think
Yeah.
that's been the biggest resource for me in my recovery journey, is having people who I can speak to who genuinely care about me and talk about the real shit, you know, like we are today, and just be honest and authentic. And it doesn't always need to feel perfect. It never is, but just getting through the lows and enjoying the highs. And yeah.
Man, I agree. Thank you so much for coming in and having this conversation with me. I know I said it before we started, but these type of conversations are something that I'm incredibly interested in. I think they're really, really important. And I really love having the spiritual kind of conversations as well. It's definitely a thread that I want to try and develop and continue throughout the show. So the fact that you can come in and have this chat with me means a lot to me. So I appreciate it. And man, honestly, thank you for sharing. I can't imagine, maybe it is easier for you now, or maybe it's still difficult, but thank you for having the courage to come on and speak your truth and share it for other people.
Honestly, it's a pleasure. And, I love we can speak about the spiritual stuff too. It's where I'm at right now in my journey. So yeah, appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, man. I don't know if you have any like in terms of like your socials and things like that. I don't know if you keep it private or you keep it open for people to reach out. But you're more than welcome to plug it if you want to, or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. I've got just a personal Instagram, which seemingly is becoming more associated with ultra running and, you know, mental health advocacy.
Yeah.
And AOD. You know, I speak about my addiction openly because, you know, I don't want there to be stigma in the world around addiction. I think it helps other people as well share their stories. So my Instagram _Jesse Ball. So JESSEBALL.
Cool.
But yeah, that's about it.
Awesome, man. Well, let's wrap it up. That's coming up 3 hours. Man, that flew by. Once again, I appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you so much, bro. And I would love to continue this conversation at some point in the future.
Yeah, me too.
And we'll be looking out for the next, the Moab or whatever that massive run is. 240 miles or whatever. We'll be looking out.
Keep going. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. And peace out, everybody.